here during Thursday, but the snow risk again moves north. It moves into North Wales, the North Midlands, Northern England, and some very deep snow expected over the Pennines, over the Peak District, Snowdonia, for example, where in some places 25 centimetres is possible. I think at the very lowest levels, so for Manchester, Liverpool, more likely to be rain, but above 100 metres, that's the greatest risk on Thursday and into Friday of some disruptive snow through central parts of the UK and eventually into Northern Ireland and perhaps parts of southern Scotland as well. It turns quieter on Friday and it turns much milder in the south.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
And a very warm welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. And coming up for you this Wednesday, yes, it's Prime Minister's Questions, live from the House of Commons. Might add lively, perhaps, today, because Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying he is up for a fight in defending the government's new illegal migration legislation. Well, the first round of that fight could be in a few minutes' time, with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer trying to land a few blows on whether the moves are actually enforceable or even legal. UNHCR, no less, this morning declaring it is profoundly concerned at the changes. We'll have the exchanges for you coming up here live on GB News in just under 10 minutes' time. And joining us in the studio for today's Prime Minister's Questions is Conservative MP for Stockton South, Matt Vickers, also a Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party. And for Labour, we have Tandezi, who is the MP for Slough, also Shadow Minister for Railways. So perhaps following today's news on the RMT strike action with some interest. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for coming with us today to see what might be, a 13-round slug out in PMQs for the Prime Minister?
Plenty going on.
And when he says he's up for a fight, is that really the correct language, bearing in mind everyone's criticising the language of a certain Gary Lineker, for instance, in terms of this issue?
Do you know what? This is a priority for people in my constituency. I'd never have a surgery where this issue isn't brought up. My inbox is devoured by it. It's something that people are really concerned about. And now we've got that sovereignty, we've got the right to determine what's happening in our borders, and Rishi's getting hold of it, grasping the issue, and as he's on the detail, it's happening. We are going to detain people.
Is he going to get on top of it? That's the main question, isn't it? Because when we remember the 5 pledges, stop the boats, the questions are, will this actually work, given all the legal concerns and the suggestion that, you know, the challenges will gum up the works, if you like?
Those important 5 pledges about getting growth, about cutting the debt, about everything else, all the stopping reducing the wait list.
They've gone by the by. It's the boats issue, isn't it?
It's the boats issue today, a huge priority for the British public, and it will hold up. You know what? There are a few people as into the detail as Rishi, as determined to make this happen as Rishi. He is going to deliver the goods, and he's going to deliver the goods that people want. You know, we've heard from Labour, there isn't a plan from Labour. Everything they talk about doesn't involve stopping the boats. They talk about immigration, they don't talk about stopping the boats. This needs a real decisive response.
Is that the problem for Keir Starmer, who we assume is going to go on the attack on this issue, that he didn't make stop the boats one of his 5 pledges? We didn't hear anything about that when he set out his priorities.
Mark, I sincerely hope that he does go on the attack on this, because the government is very weak on this. You know, this is almost like Groundhog Day. God give us the strength to actually carry on with this, because we've heard this all before. You will have no doubt heard last year when we had the Nationality and Borders Act, when we had Priti Patel, Boris Johnson. It's basically those same things being repeated again. And you know you're on choppy waters when even Priti Patel is saying that there's nothing new here, that this is mere window dressing. So that's why these gimmicks are no way to be tackling the issue. And Labour itself, and I hope that Sir Keir Starmer will be pointing this out, is that our plan is to actually build up an agreement with our European neighbours, also to make sure that we tackle illegal migration by tackling the criminal gangs, and we also ensure that
isn't that there already? However, we have heard about the cross-border schemes. We've got now the Small Boats Command that is working with the French. Those things are already in place to a degree.
Mark, but look, they have not been working because there is still no agreement with our European neighbours. Those...
What in terms of the third-party channels to get people to go back?
You know, it's all very well saying that, look, you know, all these migrants coming in, we're going to be processing them and then sending them... But we cannot send them back anywhere because there is no agreement.
Right. Isn't that a valid point, that Suella Braverman's put the cart before the horse? Surely those safe passage channels should have been there to enable people to have been moved back, because, you know, clearly Labour is saying what we're going to have maybe is more detention centres with yet more people and perhaps more hotel rooms used up with the UK 7 million a day.
Yeah, the UK is doing its bit for genuine asylum seekers. We've taken 480,000 people since 2015 from Afghanistan, from the Ukraine, but the people who are coming over on these boats, 75% of them are men aged over 30. These are economic migrants. These are not asylum seekers. These are not the genuine refugees who are... Because, do you know what? Genuine refugees probably don't have the money to pay a criminal gang to get across on one of those boats. We've got to do something, and the plan has to involve stopping the boats. Labour, this morning, Yvette Cooper was asked...
Why didn't the government then put the money and the effort into actually getting the various asylum claims dealt with in a timely manner? Because clearly, if you're saying that, you know, they aren't genuine asylum seekers, surely that means you can process them and get them out of the way.
In the last few... Yeah, the volume... This morning, Yvette Cooper's been asked several times, what are you going to do to stop the boats? There is no answer. It's all about all the window dress and the fluff around it. We need to stop the boats. It's a fundamental part of the problem. 45,000 people crossed on those boats last year. It's an explosion of recent years.
Would you say that Yvette Cooper's point about going after the criminal gangs is window dressing then?
I'll tell you what they did with the criminal gangs. We brought forward the Nationality and Borders Bill, which would give a whole life sentence to people who were involved in people smuggling to those criminal gangs. The Labour Party voted it down. We've never seen Keir vote for anything that would toughen our approach to immigration.
This is likely. This is what we're going to hear from Rishi Sunak, we expect, in terms of coming back at Keir Starmer, isn't
Mark, I completely disagree with Matt, because we pointed out last year, I remember being in the parliamentary debates, that this thing has got more holes than a Swiss cheese. You're not going to be able to solve the problem, because this will actually lead to more illegal migration. And that's exactly what has happened. You alluded earlier to...
Sorry, just to... What, in people trying to beat the new the legislation coming
Precisely. And we've seen that the number of crossings has actually been increasing.
3,000, I think, in the first 2 months of this year.
Precisely. Yeah. And to make matters worse, people have not been processed. So that backlog has increased by 60%. So we're now at more than 160,000 individuals not being processed. And what's happening, Mark, at the same time, is that it's the British taxpayer, you, me and everybody else, your viewers, who are paying more than £7 billion a day to those hotels.
Yes.
That's not what should happen.
And it seems that Labour and the Tories are agreed on this. We shouldn't be spending this money on the hotels. We should be processing people more quickly. Why aren't they being processed more quickly?
What we need to do is stop the boats coming across.
I'm asking about why aren't the people here already trying to seek asylum? Why aren't they being processed more quickly?
Due to the huge scale, we are inundated. You know, if you go back just a few years, we were talking about hundreds of people crossing in the Channel. We're now talking about 45,000. That is huge numbers. And when it comes to backlogs, back in 2016, there was 450,000 people in the asylum backlog. Right. You know, this is something...
Do you agree then with the Home Secretary's point made as the law was being introduced to the Commons? There are 100 million people around the world who could qualify for protection under our current laws. They are coming here. Is that really the right language to be using?
They are coming here. They're coming here. 45,000. No, but we...
Well, that's what she said.
We can provide safe and legal routes for people. She said 100 million are out there and they're coming here. There are a hell of a lot of people out here and they are coming here. 45,000 last year. We can't cope with that. We've got to do something to stop the boats coming. It's all well and good processing people faster, which we're going to do. It's all very good. There's nothing happening in France. These people are coming from a safe country. I mean, 30% of them are from Albania. We go on holiday to Albania. You know, it is a safe country. It's an EU accession country.
We're being told that the flights taking people back to Albania have cost more than the first-class return to New York.
If we can break the people smuggling model, the criminal gangs, if we break that down, if, like my party has done, we make those people suffer real sentences for being involved in this process, instead of profiting out of other people's peril.
Well, hold on, it's a sentence.
Break the model.
It's either a sentence or you send them back to Albania if they come
It is a sentence for the people who the criminal gangs who are smuggling them and making all of this cash.
Right, OK. There was a report, Sky News actually discovered that many of the people smuggling gangs are perhaps operating from Britain rather than from the continent, which is a surprise to many people.
So why is the government not dealing with it? It's not rocket science. They're not, out in Timbuktu. Most of them are here within the UK. And if we look at processing, Mark, under the last Labour government, because individuals were being processed, because we were following not just national laws but international laws, 60,000 individuals were being sent back. That number now is a mere 2,000. So that is why not only are individuals not being sent back, not only are individuals not being processed, we're actually going to be breaking international law, and we're doing something which is callous. We're not abiding by international agreements.
Yeah, what does Labour decide? I mean, Suella Braverman, again, when this legislation was introduced in reaction to Yvette Cooper, what she means, i.e. Yvette Cooper for Labour, is open borders by the back door.
Well, I'll tell you what, the complete red herring, talking about 100 million, what we within Labour, for example, have been arguing for is a fair immigration policy where we have those agreements, we deal with illegal immigration, but we are also a place that provides refuge to those in need as well.
OK, Prime Minister's there on the front bench. Speaker now, I think, just about to introduce Prime Minister's questions. And Rishi Sunak with a smile on his face. Let's see how long the smile asks. Over to...
Start with questions to Prime Minister. Richard Bergen.
Question number one, please, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, today is International Women's Day. At home,
we're taking huge strides to deliver equal opportunities for women, such as mandatory pay gap reporting and the landmark Domestic Abuse Act. And internationally, we have launched today a new Women and Girls strategy, which puts them at the heart of everything that we do. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 100 days ago, the Prime Minister promised to publish his tax returns. He still hasn't. People want transparency in our politics, especially because the Prime Minister is the richest Prime Minister in history and because of the concerns there have been. So why on earth hasn't the Prime Minister published his tax returns yet? When will he do so? And when he does so, will he include his US tax returns?
Mr. Speaker, as I previously confirmed, I will publish my tax returns, and that will be done very shortly.
Mr. Speaker, on International Women's Day, can I congratulate the Prime Minister on all the work that has been done on the Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict initiative and ensure that the UK continues to show its global leadership. Mr. Speaker, there are 250,000 people in this country living on park home sites. They are treated as second-class citizens by councils, where they pay council tax. They are treated poorly by managers who own the sites, and they are at a disadvantage to when we roll out our incredibly generous energy schemes. Can the Prime Minister ensure that we can actually give them more support and more help and reform the Homes Act?
My honourable friend is right that there is still more work to do to tackle problems with the sector. We are making progress in implementing changes, Mr. Speaker. Park owners' rights are now codified in writing with the site owner, and should those obligations not be met, residents can take site owners to a tribunal. Local authorities also now have powers to take enforcement action, and we will continue to support them to improve protection for park home residents everywhere.
Now comes the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And today, on International Women's Day, we celebrate the successes of women in our society. It's a crying shame that as we do so, we face legislation which drives a coach and horses through our world-leading modern slavery framework, which protects women from exploitation. Mr. Speaker, in the last decade, this government has introduced 5 plans to tackle illegal immigration, 5 utter failures. The problem just gets worse with every new gimmick. The Home Secretary says the public are sick of tough talk and inadequate action. Does he agree with her assessment of this government's record?
Mr. Speaker, what the honourable gentleman fails to recognise that there is a global migration problem. We are not alone in facing these challenges, and it is precisely because that across Europe the numbers escalating to the extent they are, we have brought forward new plans, because we are determined, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that this remains a compassionate and generous country, that is done fairly and legally. That's why we will break the criminal gangs, Mr. Speaker. We've announced new agreements with Albania and France, tougher immigration enforcement, and now new legislation that makes it clear that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. But, Mr. Speaker, what we haven't heard is the honourable gentleman's plan. We know what it is. It's open-door immigration and unlimited asylum. Whilst he may be on the side of the people smugglers, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr. Speaker, if he was serious about stopping the boats, he'd actually steal our plan on stopping the boats, smash the gangs, sort out the returns, and clean up the utter mess. Mr. Speaker.
I'm going to hear this, and nobody's going to... I wouldn't if I were you. But I think we've heard enough. I want to hear the questions and the answers, and it won't be interrupted.
Mr. Speaker, nobody on this side of the House wants open borders. On that side, they've lost control of the borders. Now, he's promised the country that this bill will stop all small boat crossings. No ifs, no buts. Sounds like more talk. So in the interest of adequate action, when will he achieve that?
Well, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we'll be implementing this plan as soon as we can pass it through Parliament. So I look forward to the honourable gentleman's support. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, on this issue, the honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this.
Prime Minister, Mr. Stafford, if you don't want to hear him, you can go and have a good cup of tea, nice and strong, I suspect. But I will hear him, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right. He should be apologising, not gloating. The Prime Minister says they will detain people who aren't eligible to claim asylum here and then return them. Well, they already tried that under the last legislation. Last year, 18,000 people were deemed ineligible to apply for asylum. That's the easy bit, the talk. But as for the action, Prime Minister, how many of them have actually been returned?
Mr. Speaker, as a result of the plans we brought forward, we have almost doubled the number of people returned this year. But he talked about laws. He talked about.
I think the front bench needs to be a little quieter because I want to hear, and I don't need you joining in. I'm going to. Our constituents want to hear the importance of Prime Minister's questions, both the questions and the answers. Show our constituents the respect they're due. Come on, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he asked about arrests. He asked about our laws. Actually, when I was in Dover yesterday talking to our law enforcement officials, what did they tell me? Precisely because of the law that the Conservative government passed last year, they have now been able to arrest more than double the number of people they did before. 397 in the last 6 months. But stopping the boats, Mr. Speaker, stopping the boats is not just my priority, it is the people's priority. But his position on this is clear. He wanted to, in his words, scrap the Rwanda deal. He voted against measures to deport foreign criminals, Mr. Speaker, and he even argued against deportation flights. Well, and we know why, because on this matter, he talked about his legal background. He's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way.
We'll continue. When you keep shouting, it prolongs, and some of you are trying to catch my eye. When you're disappointed, I don't want any complaints. Let's get through these questions so we might get some backbenching.
Mr. Speaker, all that nonsense because he doesn't want to answer the question. Because he knows what the answer is. The number is 21. I thought he was a man of detail. 21 people out of the 18,000. And what happens to the rest? They sit in hotels and digs for months on end at the taxpayers' expense. Last year, he promised to end the hotel farce. That's the talk. But because of his mess, there are thousands of people who can't claim asylum and can't be returned. So where does he actually think they're going to end up?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about the pressure on our asylum system. Right? We've actually got a clear plan to stop people coming here in the first place. Mr. Speaker, Labour have absolutely no plan on this issue because they simply don't want to tackle the problem. We introduced tougher sentences for people smugglers. They opposed it. We signed a deal with Rwanda. They opposed it. We are deporting foreign offenders as we speak. They oppose it.
I'm going to say to the member from Hull, save that good voice for the rugby match. You might be able to join Mr. Stafford over that strong cup of tea, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, He opposed every single step of what we've done to try and stop this problem. In fact, his only contribution to this debate, well, we know what it is. In his own words, what did he say? We will defend free movement. That's the Labour Party for you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, he stood there last year saying exactly the same thing. We said it wouldn't work. They passed the law. The numbers went up. Absolutely deluded. He can't say where they'll return people because they spent 140 million on Rwanda and it doesn't work. They can't say how they'll return people because this bill doesn't come with a single new return agreement. And they can't say when they'll fix the mess because it's more talk, more gimmicks, more promises to be broken. Now, a few months ago, I put to him that of the people who arrived on small boats, only 4% had been processed. He stood there and said, that's unacceptable. What's the number now?
Mr. Speaker, as a result of what we've done, there are now 6,000 fewer people in the caseload of asylum backlog. We're hiring more caseworkers. We're increasing their productivity. And again, he's mistaken when it comes to returns, Mr. Speaker, because we do have returns agreements with India, with Pakistan, with Serbia, with Nigeria, and crucially, now with Albania, where we are returning hundreds of people, Mr. Speaker. But look, our position on this is clear. If you arrive here illegally, you will not be able to claim asylum here. You will not be able to access the modern slavery system, and you will not be able to make spurious human rights claims. That is the right thing to do. But he's going on and on about process, hiding behind process, because he doesn't want to confront the substance. We are the party of fairness, and he represents the party of free movement.
I thought he was supposed to be the man of detail. He's gone to all that lengths to avoid the detail. He knows the answer to the question. Less than 1% of those who arrived by boats have been processed. He shakes his head. It's the government's own statistic. On his watch, processing of those boat cases has gone from unacceptable, in his words, to almost non-existent. And doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? After 13 years, small boat crossings higher than ever, claims unprocessed, the taxpayer paying for hotel rooms, criminal gangs running all the way laughing to the bank, and an asylum system utterly broken on his watch. This is their 5th Prime Minister, their 6th immigration plan, their 7th Home Secretary, and after all this time, all they offer is the same old gimmicks and empty promises. Now, I don't agree with the Home Secretary on very much, but when she says that the Tories are all talk and no action, she's spot on, isn't she?
Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, illegal immigration enforcement up. The amount of people processing claims up. The backlog is down. The number of returns agreements is up. Hundreds of people returned to Albania, and now new laws to detain and deter illegal migrants. It's clear what we stand for, Mr. Speaker. We're doing what's right. We are acting with compassion. We are acting with fairness, and we are acting to respect the laws and borders of our country. We are delivering what we said, and it's crystal clear here listening to this, Mr. Speaker, that it's going to be the Conservatives and only the Conservatives that stop the boats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Graphic lessons on oral sex, how to choke your partner safely, and 72 genders. This is what passes for relationships and sex education in British schools. Across the country, children are being subjected to lessons that are age inappropriate, extreme, sexualising and inaccurate, often using resources from unregulated organisations that are actively campaigning to undermine parents. This is not a victory for equality, it is a catastrophe for childhood. Will my right honourable friend honour his commitment to end inappropriate sex education by commissioning an independent inquiry into the nature and extent of this safeguarding scandal?
Can I say I share my honourable friend's concerns and thank her for her work in this area. That's why I've asked the Department for Education to ensure that schools are not teaching inappropriate or contested content in RSHE. Our priority should always be the safety and well-being of children, and schools should also make curriculum content and materials available to parents. As a result of all of this, we are bringing forward a review of RSHE statutory guidance, and we'll start our consultation as soon as possible.
SNP Leader Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, on International Women's Day, can I ask the Prime Minister to reconfirm that under his proposed new asylum laws, a woman who is sex trafficked to the UK on a small boat by a criminal gang will not be afforded protection under our modern slavery laws?
Mr. Speaker, it's precisely because we want to target our compassion and our resources on the world's most vulnerable people that we must get a grip of this system and break.
Can I just say to the SNP, it's quite right the questions are asked, but I also want to hear the answers. Shouting from up there is not helping anybody. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, it's precisely because we want to target our resources and our compassion on the world's most vulnerable people that we need to get a grip of this system, make sure that we have control over our borders, make sure our system and resources are not overwhelmed so that we can help the people most in need. There is nothing fair, there is nothing compassionate about sustaining a system where, as we saw recently, people are dying on these crossings. That is not right, and our plans will stop that from happening.
Mr. MacDonald, I don't need to hear you chunnering all the way through. You can be joining the others for a cup of tea. Come on, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, I'll take that as a yes from the Prime Minister that women who are the victims of sex trafficking will not be protected under our modern slavery laws. What a complete and utter disgrace, Mr. Speaker. But whilst it may shock, it shouldn't necessarily surprise, because this is the Tory government that in recent months has spoken of invasions. Just yesterday, this was a Tory government that said that 100 million people could be coming to these shores. And this is the Tory government that this morning said that number could in fact be billions. Complete and utter nonsense. So may I ask the Prime Minister, from whom are his government taking inspiration? Nigel Farage or Enoch Powell?
Mr. Speaker. And what a load of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. What a load of nonsense. No, in fact, the figure of 100 million, it doesn't come from the government. It comes from the United Nations, Mr. Speaker. And it illustrates the scale of the global migration crisis that the world is grappling with, which is why it is right that we take action, Mr. Speaker. Because if we do not, the numbers will continue to grow. They have more than quadrupled in just 2 years. It's a sign of what is to come, and our system will continue to be overwhelmed. And if that happens, we will not be able to help the people who are most in need of our support, our generosity, and our compassion. This has always been the way of this country, and once we get a grip of this system, that's who we can extend our support to, and that's why it's the right legislation.
Lip down.
Last year, the UK economy grew at the fastest rate in the G7 of 4.1%, while at the same time, greenhouse gas emissions fell by 3.4%, more than comparable countries. To maintain this momentum ahead of the net zero strategy refresh, will he encourage my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, to use his budget statement next week to stimulate investment in renewable energy projects by renewable energy companies, both offshore and onshore, to improve our energy security, reduce reliance on more expensive fossil fuels, and ultimately reduce bills for households?
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of our commitment to scaling up renewable energy sources. Renewables make up now nearly 40% of our electricity supply, a fourfold increase since 2011. My honourable friend will know that I cannot and will not preempt budget decisions, but he is a powerful champion for the environment in this House, and I've no doubt that he'll make his views known to the Chancellor.
Ed Davey.
Joining the tributes on International Women's Day and pay a special tribute to the women in this House, past and present, who helped shape the future of our country. Mr. Speaker, when Jean rang 999, she was told she would have to wait at least 8 hours for an ambulance. So she got in her car and drove herself to Eastbourne District General Hospital. She paid for parking and made it to the entrance of A&E, where she collapsed. Jean died an hour later. Mr. Speaker, no one should lose their mother or grandmother like that. So will the Prime Minister apologise to Jean's family and to all those who've lost loved ones due to the government's appalling ambulance delays?
Well, Mr. Speaker, of course, my thoughts and condolences go to Jean and Jean's family for what's happened. It's absolutely right that we continue to make progress on improving the performance in urgent and emergency care. We outlined plans to do this just the other month, and I'm pleased to say that we are seeing performance improve, whether it's waits in A&E or ambulance performance times, a considerably marked improvement over the last several weeks compared to the peak pressures that we saw over the winter due to COVID and flu, and because of the investments we're putting in more ambulances, more doctors and nurses, and more discharge, I'm confident that we will continue to make progress to getting the care that we all expect and need to see.
Joe Gideon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since its release earlier this year, the heartwarming and inspiring story of Dave Fishwick's journey to set up a community bank has quickly risen to be one of Netflix's top films. Last week in the Chamber, I called for more initiatives, such as the Bank of Dave, to support local communities across the UK. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that financial inclusion is an essential part of levelling up opportunities in our communities? And will he meet with me and Dave to discuss how we can replicate his success story in other areas such as Stoke-on-Trent?
Well, Mr. Speaker, community-focused banks and non-bank lenders, like the Burnley Savings and Loans, have a vital role to play in ensuring that everyone can access affordable credit. That's why we've made it quicker and easier for new banks to enter the market, and the new bank startup unit was created several years ago, and now 30 new banks have been authorised. I will ensure that my honourable friend gets the meeting with the Exchequer Secretary to discuss this issue further.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. BBC Radio 4's You and Yours have exposed queue-jumping online touts who've been buying up Eurovision tickets and putting them on sale for thousands of pounds on dodgy sites like Viagogo. In this year, when we are hosting Eurovision on behalf of war-ravaged Ukraine, this latest example of rampant rip-off culture in Tory Britain is particularly despicable. Why hasn't his government done more to support? Why hasn't his government done more to support genuine fans over the rip-off merchants, the spivs, and the ticket touts?
Well, Mr. Speaker, actually, we will continue. We have put in place measures to combat ticket touting. I'm happy to look at the documentary that he mentioned and make sure that we're doing everything we can do, and I'll talk to the Home Secretary about it. But more generally, it is a source of enormous pride for us to host Eurovision. I know it's something that everyone is looking forward to, and we should ensure that there is the broadest possible access to seeing that, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that that happens.
David Davis.
Mr. Speaker, in the aftermath of 9/11, the British government signed an extradition treaty with the United States with the intention of covering terrorism and violent crime. Since it came into force in 2003, the US has extradited 83 people to the UK. We've sent 225 to America, and 3/4 of those have been for non-violent and largely white-collar alleged crimes. There's a fundamental unfairness at the heart of our extradition treaty, and it was shown by the fact that Anna Sakoulas refused to come to face trial for the killing of Harry Dunn. The unfair treaty is compounded by an American system which coerces British citizens and gives them an unfair trial. In the last 2 decades, the American policy has been rather like an international commercial policy. Correcting this is important. Will the Prime Minister look at this treaty with a view to correcting this parity of justice?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend for his question. Obviously, it's in our national interest to have effective extradition relationships, and under the treaty we have with the US, we've secured the extradition and subsequent conviction of terrorists, murderers, rapists, and child sex offenders. I'm happy to meet with him to discuss this issue further. As he knows, the US has refused, I think, one UK extradition, and the US US has refused 1 UK extradition request and the UK has refused 27, but I know that he has concerns and I'd be happy to meet him to discuss this further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a stark correlation between areas off the gas grid and those with the highest rates of fuel poverty. It's worst in Scotland, ironically in those areas closest to the national gas reserves in the North Sea, but also in urban deprived areas where multi-storey flats are deprived of the ability of having natural gas. Being off the gas grid means that you're dependent on currently unregulated fuels such as heating oil that have risen far faster than electricity and gas, or being dependent upon old and inefficient and very costly all-electric systems. Will the Prime Minister end this by ensuring that all fuels are regulated, and also by ensuring that these households that are all electric are able to get the alternative fuel payment?
Mr. Speaker, as someone who represents a rural constituency with many people off gas grid, I appreciate the concern the honourable gentleman raises, but that's why that's always been uppermost in the government's mind as we've designed and implemented our support for people with energy bills, notably doing that based on electricity meters rather than gas, but also putting in place the alternative fuel support payment of £200, and we're making sure that that gets to everyone who needs it.
Richard Bacon.
Mr. Speaker, the adjustments to the dental contract last November were a very welcome step, but there is more work to do. Will the Prime Minister therefore keep this area under the very closest review to ensure that constituents such as mine in South Norfolk and those of other honourable members get the best possible dental care?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend raises an excellent point, and I can tell him that we are continuing to invest in NHS dentistry, £3 billion a year, but we've also enabled practices to do 10% more activity on top of their contracts and remove the barriers so that hygienists and other therapists can continue to work to their full skill set. The number of NHS dentists has increased by about 500 over last year, and we'll continue to work with the sector to see what more we can do.
Rosie Duffield.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As today is International Women's Day, does the Prime Minister agree with me that voters in the run-up to May's local elections have every right to ask candidates who are standing for a position of responsibility in local government questions relating to women's rights? And does he believe that as representatives of their political parties, all candidates must answer those questions honestly, politely and with respect while standing on a voter's doorstep?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable lady makes an excellent point, and I wholeheartedly agree with her. These are important questions. Voters deserve to have clear and straightforward answers to them, and I hope that she can continue to put her campaign forward. She'll have my full support, and I hope in the local elections we can debate these issues in the way that they should be.
Chris Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last weekend, I had the pleasure of being auctioned off for the Conservative Women's Organisation. On this International Women's Day, will my right honourable friend join me in paying tribute to the excellent work the CWO do to get more women, Conservative women, into politics, and pay tribute to all the remarkable women who support us in the work we do, especially because she's in the gallery, my mum.
Mr. Speaker, can I congratulate first of all my honourable friend for his successful auction. I assume it wasn't his mother that bid for him successfully, but also pay tribute to her, but also pay tribute to the work of the Conservative Women's Organisation for the fantastic work they do. We need more women standing in local and national politics, and everyone who is working to bring that about deserves our praise and thanks, and long may it continue.
Richard Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On today's International Women's Day, research published by pensions company Scottish Widows has shown that a woman retiring today would have to work to the age of 81 to achieve a pension fund parity with her male counterpart. And as every bit is worrying, a woman in the workplace today, aged 25, can still expect to retire with a pension fund £100,000 on average lesser than her male counterparts. Yep. With all of the fiscal and social policy levers at his disposal, can the Prime Minister tell us how he is going to set a course to shut that gap over what remains of his premiership?
Well, Well, Mr. Speaker, the government takes the issue of the gender pensions gap incredibly seriously, and we've delivered groundbreaking pension reforms and major progress. Automatic enrolment has in fact helped millions more women save into the pension, and pensions participation among eligible women in the private sector was 87% in the last available year, up from just 40% a few years ago. And we remain committed to the measures in the 2017 review, and will continue to give this issue all the attention it deserves until we can close the gap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Grimsby Town Football Club has reached the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. The last time the team achieved that was in 1939, which by coincidence was the previous time that the town had a Conservative MP. Now I know that Grimsby beats the Prime Minister's team of Southampton to get to this next stage, but would he join with me in congratulating the team and wishing them the best of luck when they play against Brighton and Hove Albion in the next stage?
Mr. Speaker, it pains me, although I will say congratulations to the Honourable Lady and Grimsby for their victory over Southampton, and I now have a new team to support in the Cup, and she'll have my full support. I wish them well against their next match and look forward to cheering her and all her colleagues on.
Steve McKay.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard the Prime Minister talk fondly about helping out in his mum's community pharmacy. How will we feel if 600 of them close this year because of a vicious NHS contract which takes no account of rising costs and is forcing many into bankruptcy?
Mr. Speaker, I praise the work that our community pharmacies do. They're fantastic at being on the front line of delivering primary care, and as I've said previously, the government is exploring ways in which we can support them to do even more, because I think improving access to pharmacies is something that people would both welcome and would help people get the care that they need faster and more efficiently, and we'll continue to look at all the proposals that have been given to us.
Kelly Thomas.
For more than 2 years, an illegal waste site has been operating in the village of Borstal. Tipper lorries covering their number plates as they thunder onto the site at all hours of the day and night, blighting the lives of the residents that live directly by and creating untold environmental damage. I thank the DEFRA team for their engagement with the Environment Agency so far, but no action has been taken. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that enough is enough and swift multi-agency action should be taken to stop and shut down illegal and criminal activity such as this?
Well, can I thank my right honourable friend for raising this issue. The government is committed to tackling waste crime, and the Joint Unit for Waste Crime brings together agencies in the way that she described. I am aware she's met the local Environment Agency director about this particular issue, but I will also ensure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss this further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my constituent Ollie Stevens was just 13 years old when he was stabbed and brutally murdered in a local park just yards from his home. The two boys who attacked him had shared dozens of pictures of knives online before the attack. So could the Prime Minister explain to me why the government's removed measures to tackle this sort of dreadful online content from the Online Safety Bill?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm very sorry to hear about the case that the honourable gentleman raises. My thoughts are with Ollie's family. He's absolutely right that we should do everything we can to tackle the scourge of knife crime, and that's why, for instance, this government brought forward new powers to improve the police's use of stop and search, which has made a major difference, and actually violent crime is now down considerably over the past few years. The Online Safety Bill also goes further than any other country has gone to make sure that we are protecting children online. I'm happy to look at the specific issue that he mentions, but it's been praised by the Children's Commissioner and others for being a groundbreaking law that will do wonders to improve children's safety.
Daniel Cutchins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State for DEFRA will be visiting Shrewsbury at the end of this month at my invitation, and she will hear the tremendous progress to date from the River Severn Partnership and the Environment Agency that we are working to try to find a holistic solution to managing Britain's longest river, the River Severn. We are now experiencing flooding in Shrewsbury on an annual basis, with tremendous economic damage as a result. Will he take an interest, please, and secure additional funding for DEFRA so that we can finally tame these rivers and protect our communities from annual flooding?
This is an issue that my honourable friend has raised before, and he's right to do so. The government has doubled double investment in flood defences over this Parliament to £5.2 billion. I know the DEFRA Secretary will have a visit, we'll talk to him and his communities, and I look forward to hearing back from her after that.
Gerald Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Between 1997 and 2010, Labour governments across the UK lifted 800,000 children out of poverty. Yet, since 2010, the Conservatives have driven 500,000 children into poverty, with child poverty next year predicted to reach levels not seen since the 1990s. There is not enough parliamentary time this year for the Prime Minister to say sorry to each child damaged by their policies. But could the Prime Minister start today by saying sorry for all the children that he failed during this time?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the exact stats are since 2010 there are 1.2 million fewer people in poverty than there were, and that's because of the actions that this Conservative government has been putting in place, like raising the national living wage, which, by the way, Mr. Speaker, the best way to ensure that children especially do not grow up in poverty is to ensure that they are not growing up in a workless household. And as a result of the actions of this government in getting people into work, there are now several thousand fewer workless households than in 2010.
That's the outfit.
It was a great pleasure to welcome the Prime Minister to Dover to talk about the work he's undertaking on the pull factors to tackle illegal immigration. The Prime Minister has a meeting upcoming with President Macron this week. Could I ask him to see what more can be done to deal with the push factors of illegal migration around small boats, particularly pushing those boats across French beaches and pushing those boats from French beaches into the French Sea?
Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, there is no single lever that will solve this problem, which is right that we work on all the different things that will make a difference, including close cooperation with the French. That's why I was pleased at the end of last year the Home Secretary and I announced the largest ever small boats deal with France, 40% increase in patrols, greater cooperation, and we look forward to strengthening that cooperation and furthering that discussion this Friday.
Imran Hussain.
Mr. Speaker, let us be absolutely clear in this chamber. Under this government's new dystopian, far-right, appeasing, anti-refugee bill, those who were trafficked to the UK would still face deportation. Can the Prime Minister therefore clear up whether Sir Mo Farah, who last year bravely revealed that he was trafficked to the UK as a child, would have been removed under this bill?
Mr. Speaker, it's precisely because that we do want to help the world's most vulnerable people that we've got to stop our system being exploited and overwhelmed by illegal migrants who are being trafficked here by criminal gangs. There is nothing compassionate, there is nothing fair about supporting that system continuing, and that's why our new laws are the right way to deal with this, and I hope that he can see that and support them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning on International Women's Day, I joined some of the amazing young women at Our Lady of Lourdes School in Leigh-on-Sea to take part in the FA's Let Girls Play Football. Does my right honourable friend agree that sport, and football in particular, is a brilliant way to empower young women? And would he visit Southend and celebrate some of our aspiring lionesses?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes an excellent point. I wholeheartedly agree with her. Hopefully I can come and visit her. She's right about the power of sport to both engage young women but also to inspire others. I'm looking forward to seeing the lionesses later today, and the government is pleased to announce today more funding and more support for sport in schools, which I hope she will warmly welcome.
Final question, Tahir Ali.
Mr. Speaker, on International Women's Day, it is vital we talk about women in Indian-occupied Kashmir being subjected to rape, domestic abuse, kidnapping, forced marriage and torture by the Prime Minister's Moody's extremist BJP-led government. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the BJP government have exploited women through gender-based violence? And does he agree that the UK government should be standing in solidarity with Kashmiri women?
Speaker, this government has a proud record of standing up for women and girls across the world. We have led the way in preventing sexual violence in conflict, and we're taking a lead on ensuring tens of millions of girls receive the high-quality education that they deserve in some of the poorest parts of the world. And just today, we have announced a new women and girls strategy from the Foreign Office and backed that up with £200 million more to support women's health around the world. And that continues our leadership on this issue, which will remain the case.
Just let the chamber clear.
That was PMQs, and we reflect, of course, that we had Rishi Sunak saying he was up for a fight on the issue of migration. Well, he certainly got it, I think, in terms of that session at Prime Minister's Questions. Our MPs are still with us here in the studio to give their reaction. And I will just perhaps get a couple of quotes up from those exchanges. He's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way. That was the Prime Minister on Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer on Rishi Sunak. He's absolutely deluded on migration policies. Matt Vickers here for Conservatives and Tandeshi for Labour. A lefty lawyer? A badge of honour, maybe. What do you think? I don't know.
I'll tell you what, Mark, as Keir himself pointed out, when he was in charge of the CPS, he was involved in deporting individuals who had been involved in criminality. But I think the reason...
I think he said the conviction rate when he was there doubled.
Yes. So whether we base it on that, and the fact that the Conservatives have got into such a mess on this entire policy, I think it is emblematic of what has been happening over the last 13 years. And I'm glad, Mark, that during the PMQs also, we heard individuals say that whether it is on International Women's Day, a woman who is trafficked would not be protected under international law. We would have no safeguards. The likes of Mo Farah, a celebrated Olympian, he would have been deported had it been for the current laws proposed by the government. So on so
and perhaps
many
wouldn't have been allowed to actually make another claim then as a result of this new legislation either. That's the other point.
No, and that is why it is very, very sad that the Conservatives are leading the country down this line.
Right. Well, Matt, we certainly got a flavour of what the Conservatives think maybe is a vote winner in terms of the politics of this. A couple of phrases. We are on the side of the people's priority. Clearly, the thinking is that this strikes a chord with the public.
I don't think it is just a vote winner. I think it is actually the right thing to do. 45,000 people arrived in this country. Our asylum system cannot cope. That is why on Monday, MPs will have the chance to vote to detain people who arrive in this country illegally via smuggling gangs, to return people to the country that they came from or to a safe third country. It is the right thing to do. It's not just about votes.
The problem is, Keir Starmer challenged him, when will this be achieved? When will the boats stop coming? And Rishi Sunak came out, as soon as we can pass the legislation through Parliament. But clearly, the numbers tell maybe a different story. And we had, for instance, the figure of 18,000 of people deemed inadmissible, only 21 returns, Keir Starmer pointed out.
Do you know what? There is a huge problem globally with people moving around the globe. In Britain, the consequence of that has been that instead of hundreds of people coming across in the Channel, 45,000 last year. On Monday, we'll see that choice put before MPs. I'll tell you now that Keir Starmer won't back it. When he ran for leader of the Labour Party, he talked about free movement and how great it was. He then went on every single opportunity he's had to toughen up this country's immigration system. He has not backed it.
And
He's
this will be the attack line you think the Tories will continue with, we will defend free movement, is what they see as the Labour line.
He has opposed the deportation of foreign criminals. Last week we saw in the paper somebody done for murder who was on a deportation flight, who shouldn't be in this country, but Labour MPs and lefty lawyers backed them and fought it all the way. The Labour have no plan to deal with small boats.
We don't know what the politics of the lawyers involved are. However, obviously this is an issue that Labour haven't in terms of the criticism from the Tories, actually set out what their approach would be in terms of stopping the votes. It wasn't, as we said, one of those 5 pledges that Keir Starmer had put out.
Mark, Yvette Cooper set out our plan as to how we want to have those agreements with other nations, how we would make sure that we would process those claims, and we will make sure that we actually deal with this rather than presenting gimmicks. And I'm glad also that...
And this will be tackling the criminal gangs.
Tackling the criminal gangs. There's a proper plan that has already been laid out by Yvette Cooper yesterday. And I'm glad also that Keir went into the details around this, because, as you said, after spending more than £140 million, not one flight to Rwanda, that little gimmick has cost the taxpayer hugely. And on top of that, out of the 18,000, only 21 were actually deported. That's less than 0.01%. So it is incompetence and failure at a colossal scale. And that's why our government, the UK government, is not dealing with the problem, unlike others. And we are not actually, by the way, dealing with as many claims as the likes of France and Germany.
OK, and I think the other figure, only 4% of those small boats people processed, now down to less than 1%.
That's right, yeah, it's actually gone down. And I'll tell you another thing, Mark.
Well, very quickly, we've got some breaking news coming up. Yeah.
I did ask the Immigration Minister about this, because hundreds of individuals, young people, have been lost. There are still 200 young people where the Home Office, the government, doesn't actually know where they are. And since January, only 9 of those individuals have been found. So it is...
So they're still out there somewhere.
They're still out there.
Right. Well, we'll come back to this in a moment, but I'm just going to break in, because we have got some breaking news coming in from America, where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have revealed that their daughter has been christened as... Yes, a princess. Princess Lilibet Diana. This, we are now being told, happened on Friday. The Archbishop of Los Angeles was attending, we think, at their home in California. It's understood that the title of princess and then Archie's title of prince will be used in formal settings, but not in everyday conversational use, we are told. Let's get more with our royal reporter, Cameron Walker. Cameron, the timing of this is quite interesting, because it was only the other day we were suggesting that there may be some channels discussing whether they come for the coronation and whether, in fact, the children will be involved in that process.
Yes, Mark, it's come as quite a surprise, actually, that the Sussex's spokesperson has confirmed that Lilibet has been christened as a princess. Now, under the letters patent set out in 1917, grandchildren of a monarch do automatically have the right to be a prince or princess. However, there was some confusion as to whether Harry and Meghan would choose to use the titles for their own children. And certainly if the king or the king as the monarch has given his blessing or permission for them to use those titles. But nonetheless, it's here in black and white. I have had it confirmed to me that Lilibet has been christened Princess Lilibet Diana, which is clearly very significant. People magazine is reporting as well that's the christening that took place on Friday. Invites were sent out, another set of invites to this christening, invites to the King, Queen Consort and the Prince and Princess of Wales. Now, that has not been confirmed by either the Sussexes or Kensington or Buckingham Palace, but if it is true, that would suggest to me that Harry and Meghan are very much trying to create some kind of olive branch to reach out to their extended family here in the United Kingdom, at the same time that the Sussexes are perhaps, let's say, in negotiations to maybe attend the coronation a little bit later on this year of the King. The royal family's website on the line of succession does still list both Archie, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's son, and Lilibet, the daughter who's just been christened, as Master and Miss. So in terms of official Buckingham Palace words, they are still classed as Master and Miss. They are not Prince and Princess, but clearly in the eyes of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, their children have the right to be titled Prince and Princess. And as you said earlier, Mark, they are going to be used in formal settings rather than everyday chatter. But nonetheless, I think it shows the perhaps motive and wanting from the Prince and from the Duke and Duchess of Sussex on the other side of the Atlantic, just 8 weeks before the coronation.
Right. Well, and we shall obviously see if there's some pictures coming up of that christening as well, although we understand maybe that was at their home in California. But thank you for updating us with that breaking news, with a new princess joining the royal family, albeit perhaps at some distance for the moment. More coming up from Cameron on that. But let's get more on what we've been hearing at PMQs with our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, joining us now at Westminster. And one is a lefty lawyer, the other one is absolutely deluded, Tom.
Yes, it was a feisty exchange, wasn't it, Mark? And I think this is really setting the tone for what is to come. Rishi Sunak really playing on ground that he feels is fairly safe for the Conservatives. Of course, he said that stopping the boats was one of his top 5 priorities, whereas with Keir Starmer's top 5 mission statements, migration does not feature. The Conservatives feel like this is their ground. However, as Sir Keir Starmer mentioned in that exchange, under the Conservatives, we have seen numbers of boats go up, quadrupled in the last few years. Now, for his part, Rishi Sunak says that this is a problem that is growing across the continent and we need new laws to tackle this new global problem. But obviously the Labour Party is saying there have been laws before, and we heard one of those lines from Sir Keir Starmer that I have no doubt at all we will hear again and again from the Labour Party, which is that new laws were passed last year with regard to the illegal migration situation in the Channel, and they simply did not work. The numbers went up. The Conservative Party, for their part, will of course say, well, these laws were challenged in court. Not a single flight has left for Rwanda yet. And of course, we heard that refrain of lefty lawyer coming from the Prime Minister directed at Sir Keir Starmer, someone before his political life who wrote as a junior lawyer that every migration law has a tinge of racism about it. No doubt we're going to see more Conservative attacks on Sir Keir Starmer and what he has said on these issues in the past. We heard the Labour Party be described as the party of free movement.
OK, Tom, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's just actually bring our MPs back in, because there's another bit of breaking news coming through from Westminster, and that is that Dave Penman, who's the General Secretary of the FDA union looking after civil servants, has written to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, and alleging that the Home Secretary may have broken ministerial rules after launching a direct attack on the impartiality of those civil servants. And it is to do with these migration issues, or immigration issues. Apparently, after Suella Braverman had said... quote, an activist blob of left-wing lawyers, civil servants and the Labour Party blocked us from previously dealing with people unlawfully coming to Britain. Well, the FDA now has basically challenged the Prime Minister as this statement being factually incorrect and a direct attack on the integrity and impartiality of the public servants. It does seem that the language, and, you know, not just the FDA, but a certain Gary Lineker as well, it's getting quite touchy, should we say? Yeah,
do you know what? There are people who completely oppose this, like Sir Keir, as we've seen on so many occasions when he's voted against any sort of toughening up of immigration law. Nobody's going to get in the way of this. Rishi is determined to deliver this. This is what the British people want, and this government's going to deliver it for them, regardless of the lefty lawyers and regardless of the Labour Party. We will get it across the line.
Does this help, but, you know, phrases of lefty lawyers and activist blob when it is matters of such public import?
It's about record, actually. I think sometimes that's the issue. Like we talk about Sir Keir, the king of flip-flop. Now, in there, he's talking about anything but small boats, but he's making the noises that he's actually aligned with what the British people want. He's anything but, and his record tells us that. We know how he's voted. We know what he said in the past.
Yeah. And talking of language, you know, Sir Keir Starmer saying he's absolutely deluded. Again, you know, is this really the correct way to approach this public debate?
Well, look, inflammatory language isn't going to get us anywhere, but neither are gimmicks. It is, in essence, it's like Groundhog Day. You will remember when...
Cooper's phrase.
When David Cameron was there all those many years ago, saying that, look, I am going to bring net migration down to the tens of thousands. In fact, the opposite happened. Due to the policies that he enacted, hundreds of thousands was the exact figure, not tens of thousands. And now, just last year, thanks to the policies of successive Conservative governments, the figure is now in excess of 500,000. So 504,000 was a net migration figure. That is why policy after policy has failed, and that's the other reason why even Priti Patel is saying that, look, this is just window dressing, nothing new here, this is just more gimmicks, and that is why we need to oppose this and actually come up with a sensible plan, something that will work.
Right.
And make sure that we deliver for the British people.
Gentlemen, thank you both for your temperate language in approaching the debate and following PMQs today. Sorry we don't have time to talk about the RNT, but we will do that in the next hour on the strikes, as we will on that breaking news of a new princess joining the royal family. And we'll be looking at the snow. It's on its way. So let's get the weather in a bit more detail for you.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Some southern parts of England and Wales woke up to a covering of snow. That snow is turning back to rain across the far south, whilst snow moves into central areas, and the far north stays very cold, but largely bright. Northern Scotland woke up to a temperature of -15 Celsius in some spots, whilst the cold air is interacting with a band of rain in the south to produce some snow. But that snow risk moves north because milder air is turning it all back to rain, albeit quite heavy rain across the southwest and the far south of England. The snow then, by the afternoon and evening, mainly focused around the M4 northwards into parts of Wales, especially the Welsh Mountains, eventually into the Midlands as well. It's going to feel cold everywhere, but it's bright skies for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. A few snow showers continuing for the far north of Scotland, but only a few centimetres accumulating, and mainly over hills. The main cause for concern is across this central swathe of the UK overnight, where there'll be some persistent and, at times, moderate snowfall, especially through Wales, the Midlands, parts of East Anglia and central southern England. But mainly it's around the M4 northwards where the greatest risk is, because in the south it's going to be spells of rain and milder air. And in the far north, once again, a very chilly night, temperatures dipping to -10 to -15 Celsius for sheltered glens of northern Scotland. A few more snow flurries here during Thursday, but the snow risk again moves north. It moves into North Wales, the North Midlands, Northern England, and some very deep snow expected over the Pennines, over the Peak District, Snowdonia, for example, where in some places 25 centimetres is possible. I think at the very lowest levels, so for Manchester, Liverpool, more likely to be rain. But above 100 metres, that's the greatest risk on Thursday and into Friday of some disruptive snow through central parts of the UK and eventually into Northern Ireland and perhaps parts of southern Scotland as well. It turns quieter on Friday and it turns much milder in the south.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts of
Moss?
rumors. Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends were like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Very good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. You're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this lunchtime, breaking news. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's daughter is now Princess Lilibet Diana. She was christened on Friday, we've been told, by the Archbishop of Los Angeles. That's coming from a spokesperson for Harry and Meghan in California. Nothing yet from the palace. What does that tell us? We'll be speaking to a royal commentator and our own royal correspondent. Snowman. The Met Office warning for snow, ice, plunging temperatures extended to yet more parts of the UK. Tonight expected to be the coldest night of the year once more. Are we prepared for the cold snap? And the government's plan to tackle illegal migration dominating Prime Minister's questions. We'll have the latest reaction from Westminster. And as ever, get in touch with your views on that and how you're coping with the weather. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But first, let's update you with the latest headlines with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers, as the two have gone head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak has defended new legislation which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum. Sir Keir Starmer cast doubt on the plans, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings have failed in the last decade and numbers have gone up. He says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, which Mr Sunak denied, accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
And some other breaking news, as you've been hearing, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's daughter has been christened Princess Lilibet Diana at a private ceremony at their home in Los Angeles. The couple's spokesperson says Lily's title of princess and Archie's title of prince will only be used in formal settings. Harry and Meghan say they don't want to deny their children their birthright, but let them decide whether or not to keep using the titles when they're older. Buckingham Palace says the royal website will now be updated in due course to reflect their titles. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace has reiterated that comments made by a former royal aide towards a charity boss last year were deeply regrettable. Lady Susan Hussey, the Prince of Wales's godmother, apologised and resigned after it emerged she repeatedly asked Ngozi Fulani where she really came from. Miss Fulani has now temporarily stepped down from leading her domestic violence organisation because of the backlash she has faced. The palace says it's supported her with security concerns, social media abuse, and has reached out to Miss Fulani, but has not yet heard back. In other news, the RMT union has called off planned strike action for Network Rail workers following an improved pay offer. Union members have been taking part in walkouts for months in a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Industrial action was due to take place on the 16th and 17th of March, but it's now been suspended. The union, though, says action with 14 other train operating companies will still go ahead. Temperatures dropped to minus 15.2 degrees in the Highlands overnight, making it the coldest night of the year so far as an Arctic blast spreads across the UK. The Met Office says more sleet and snow is expected across southern England and South Wales, while hail showers will hit Scotland's northern coasts. Sub-zero temperatures are predicted in all four nations until Friday. Weather journalist Nathan Rao told us a number of national yellow warnings have been issued, with more to come.
Disruption, road disruption, snow on the roads, problems clearing the roads, and the school closures as well. Parts of the country over the next few days could get 10 inches, but that's rural areas, the usual places, the Highlands, the Glens, where snow tends to settle. So we're looking for pretty much an accumulation of proper winter snowy weather 8 days into spring.
On International Women's Day, the Foreign Secretary is set to announce the government's new approach to helping women and girls around the world. James Cleverly will travel to his mother's hometown in Sierra Leone to visit a school and a hospital and see UK-funded projects in action. He'll also announce new funding for a sexual health and rights programme. It's expected to receive up to £200 million and aims to prevent tens of thousands of maternal deaths and millions of unsafe abortions. And a weight loss jab is to become available for thousands of people living with obesity. The appetite suppressant Wegovy will be offered on prescription through the NHS in England. Previous studies found those who received the drug as a weekly injection over 68 weeks saw their weight drop by 12%. Experts have described the treatment as a pivotal moment. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. So let's update you on that breaking news that we're getting from California, no less. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex saying their daughter has been christened as Princess Lilibet Diana. This happening on Friday, apparently, at their home in California. A spokesperson for the Sussexes saying, I can confirm Princess Lilibet Diana was christened on Friday, March the 3rd, by the Archbishop of Los Angeles, the Reverend John Taylor. We believe, indeed, that was taking place at their home. But it's the first time that she's been publicly referred to as a princess. Now, Buckingham Palace has in the last few minutes said that the royal website will be updated in due course. That's the phrase they've used to reflect the titles. At the time of Queen Elizabeth's death and the King's accession to the throne, Buckingham Palace saying a spokesman for the King had pledged to update their names on the site as and when we get information. Well, let's speak now to Richard Fitzwilliams, royal commentator, joining us. Richard, this is an interesting sort of line of communication that we understand it happened on Friday. We're now being told about it from California. Clearly, Buckingham Palace seems to have been caught on the hop and is trying to update the official website.
Yes, I think with reference to Archie and Lily's titles, they were automatically due them by the 1917 letters patent from George V. So this was supposedly something that would happen automatically. Equally, of course, it's up to each individual monarch. And there was some speculation because of the royal rift that this might not happen. Now, also, there's the issue of whether or not the Sussexes want Archie and Lily to use them. And obviously, they want to give them the option. It's all a rather complex matter because obviously there is a deep rift in the royal family, as we know. The christening, no doubt a very happy event with Lily. We know that King Charles and the Prince of Wales were asked, according to Omid Scobie, who's the unofficial spokesperson for the Sussexes. They chose not to attend. We don't know whether, in fact, Harry and Meghan will be attending the coronation. But this, at least, makes absolutely clear that both Archie and Lily will have the Prince and Princess titles, certainly if they want to use them, which is, of course, somewhat ironic since their parents cannot use the HRH.
Yeah, and a bit more context, if we can put it that way, coming in from California, where they say that the princess's title and prince for Archie, of course, will be used in formal settings, but not in everyday conversational use by the couple. Understood to be keen not to deny their children their birthright, but to allow them the chance to decide for themselves when older whether to drop or keep using the titles. I mean, it's, is it something you can actually decide to drop, or is it a badge that you have to carry with you for the rest of your life?
Well, obviously, they will. The idea is, of course, to give them the choice in the sense that, for example, Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice, they were given the HRHs, they chose to use them. In theory, they need not necessarily have. The fact that they are royal and the fact that they use the HRHs means that there's far more press attention. Now, that is an aspect of it, which, of course, the Sussexes will no doubt have considered, especially since they have such fraught relations with the press. But yes, it is a very curious situation since both the Sussexes, Harry and Meghan, have an HRH, but are under the agreement with the Queen. They are not permitted to use it. But on the other hand, you have their children who may or may not decide to use an HRH. It's interesting that Anderson Cooper, when Harry was giving an interview to promote his memoir Spare, asked Harry, why not give up your titles? And Harry bridled and said words to the effect of, what would that prove and why should we? Well, very clearly they attach more importance to titles than we thought.
Right. Last quick thought then, Richard. Does it tell us anything about what's going on behind the scenes in terms of attending the coronation, the very fact that they've made this public?
I can only say that it puts a very significant question mark, of course, towards the fact that we don't know, but my own bet is that they will definitely attend the coronation. They're members of the royal family. They have contracts with Netflix, Spotify and Random House because of this, and if they were not to, they would be seen as outsiders, and I don't think, whatever the feelings individually, and no doubt security will be catered for, I don't think that's a future they could possibly contemplate. If you're seen as an outsider, it's bad for business.
Message received and understood. Richard, thank you very much indeed for joining us. More, of course, as we get it from California or Buckingham Palace. But let's reflect now. Prime Minister's questions a little earlier dominated by this issue of migration and in particular the language that was used. Just to remind you, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, calling Sir Keir Starmer, he's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way, while Sir Keir Starmer referred to the Prime Minister as being absolutely deluded on migration policies. Well, in terms of the language being used, we also have, writing in the Sun newspaper today, the Tory MP for Dudley North, Marco Longhi, basically supporting the plans, but also calling the people that trying to stop it the blob of lefty lawyers virtue signalling civil servants doing all they can to block the new plans. Well, he joins us now because we have, I understand, the FDA, the Civil Service Union, writing to the Prime Minister about the language being used on all this.
Oh, really? Well, that would be very interesting. I'd like to see them actually focusing on what the Prime Minister wants to do, what this Conservative government wants to do, which is to stop the boats. We are very clear about that. And what they need to do is understand how governance in this country works. So, the civil service can advise, but politicians decide. And once the politicians have decided, that's what the civil service should respond to.
But just also reflecting perhaps on the discussion about the remarks from Gary Lineker, clearly that the language and the temperature, I think we seem to have lost Mr. Longy there for a moment. We'll try and regain the signal there and return to that debate. Have we managed to... No, I'm afraid we haven't got it for the moment, but we'll return to Mark Olongi just to get his views. As we said, writing in The Sun today and then being raised at Prime Minister's questions, still very much an active issue of debate. But let's now look at the latest that we are talking about in terms of strikes, what it's cost the economy. Some fairly stark figures have been released in terms of what it's cost the economy. Our Business and Economics editor Liam Halligan joining us with On the Money. Cue the music. No, we haven't got the music either, but we have got Liam, which I'm very glad to say is going to fill us in on the details, because inevitably we were thinking all the strike days that it was going to hit the economy. But we've got some meat on the bone now.
Well, the breaking news is that the RMT rail union has delayed some of the strikes that are next week.
On the Network Rail side, rather than the trains.
On the Network Rail side, on Thursday the 16th. We're not yet sure what happened with the tube strikes on Wednesday the 15th. Which is Budget Day, of course. Which, of course, is Budget Day, and quite a lot of the civil service are striking on Budget Day as well, we know, for their in their wisdom, as it were. But what I also wanted to highlight, Mark, were the numbers of days that the UK economy has lost to strikes, as you said. Because, of course, when people go on strike, things don't get done, the economy suffers, the GDP numbers suffer, tax revenues suffer, because the economy stalls. We've all felt that experience in the middle of strikes. And this morning, the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, brought out some statistics, and I've put them up on a graphic here, and GB News radio listeners can follow my voice. What these numbers say, so between June and December 2022, there were 2,472,000 days lost to strike action. That's during those 6 months. And that averages out, Mark, to 412,000 strike days lost per month, which sounds like an awful lot, and it is an awful lot. But that 412,000 days on average, in the summer, like June 2022, it's like 30 or 40,000 a month. But by December 2022...
Well, no, the action ramped up.
When the action ramped up, 873,000 days lost to strike action during that single month. And you know what it was like before Christmas. The civil service were on strike, the electorers were on strike, some of the teachers were on strike, ambulance workers were on strike. And you and I were saying in the newsroom, it feels like the 1970s, it feels like when we were kids. So what I did, I dug out from the ONS database the actual record number of strike days lost in a month, and that was in September 1979, the height of the run-up to the winter of discontent. And while we lost 873,000 days in December last year, in September 1979, look at that, we lost 11.7 million days.
Well, I think even the gravediggers were on strike, we seem to remember, in the dim and distant past.
And so the point I'm making here with these numbers, and I do really think they are eye-popping, even if you're just listening to them on the radio, in December last year, it felt like the whole country was grinding to a halt. We lost fewer than 1 million days in strike action. When we were kids in 1979, we lost 12 million days in a single month.
And is it the case that in those days, union membership was far higher?
It was
and
far
we had
higher.
a lot more heavy industry where they were involved?
We had a lot more heavy industry. We had a lot more nationalised industries. 51% of the workforce was unionised back in the late 70s, Mark. Now it's about 23, 24%. But, and it's an important but, over half of the public sector is unionised. The fifth of us that work in the public sector, that work for the state. And those public sector unions, some of them anyway, parts of them, tend to be quite militant, and increasingly so post-lockdown.
Yeah.
So this industrial action is bad. These ONS numbers out this morning show that the economy really suffers when there is strike action, but it is nothing compared to the late 1970s.
And this may explain why the tax take has actually been quite high in terms of this 30 to 54 billion, whatever it is, that they found extra because the tax take's been slightly better, so they don't have to borrow quite as much.
The main reason, you're right, we're heading for the budget now. It's next Wednesday the 15th, and there does seem to be...
When there's a tube strike.
Yeah, it does seem to... I'll have to sleep under the desk the night before. There does seem to be a little bit more what we call fiscal headroom in the national accounts. So the Office for Budget Responsibility, when they look at the amount of revenue that the government has to borrow this fiscal year, they're looking to be like 30 to 40 billion pounds too pessimistic. So government borrowing looks as if it's going to be less. It doesn't mean there's extra money to spend. It just means the government has to borrow less than we thought.
And does this give them a little bit more, or at least the Treasury can say to those who are talking to the rail unions, to the health unions, Steve Barclay, or, we've got a little bit more flexibility. Perhaps we can find a way through
I don't think the Treasury would ever acknowledge that. The public sector unions will scream that from the rooftops. You've got the money. They haven't actually got the money. They just might need to borrow a bit less. We might need to go less in debt than we thought we were going to. But the really big thing here, Mark, the really important thing, what really drives tax revenues, and tax revenues have been pretty healthy despite those strike numbers that we talked about, is economic growth. And the reality is that pretty much the entire commentariat thought Britain was going to go into recession, two successive causes of economic contraction. I've been saying for a long time we're probably going to dodge recession.
And green shoots.
And I'm now talking about green shoots. If you look at the survey data, the Purchasing Managers' Index survey data, consumer confidence, yes, it's difficult. Yes, this cost of living crisis is ongoing. Yes, it would be a hammer blow to lots of businesses if the government raises corporation tax next week, as is expected, from 19 to 25%. The first rise in corporation tax it will be for more than 50 years. But despite all that, the economy is still showing signs of life and growth.
Resilience is the phrase. As ever, thank you for taking us through all those figures, and we'll see, of course, what happens next Wednesday, if we can get to work, on a particular day, of course. Now, let's reflect, talking about getting to work or even getting home from work. The Met Office saying that last night, the coldest night of the year so far, but it could be even worse to come tonight. Temperatures in the Highlands have dropped to a record low, minus 15.2 Celsius. Nighttime sub-zero climbs predicted in all 4 UK nations until at least Friday. After a very chilly start, the Met Office issuing several more yellow weather warnings for snow and ice, covering London too in the south. That's still in place until tomorrow morning. Let's head to Hazelmere in Surrey. Our South East of England reporter, Ray Addison, is there. And we can see why, Ray, because you've chosen one of the best spots to show what's happened. I mean, I think we were sort of referring to you in the old days as the North Downs, but they call it the Surrey Hills now, which is a bit posher.
Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. Of course, that doesn't negate the disruption that it's causing to our roads, but it really is quite a beautiful sight to behold, this blanket of snow that's coming down and continues to come down. I spent much of the morning sort of driving around the southeast. I've been through Sussex and Hampshire and here in Surrey, of course, and this certainly here in Surrey has got the highest amount of snowfall that I've personally seen. Much of the snow in Sussex and Hampshire already melting, and of course that water pooling in the roads and causing its own disruption to traffic. Of course, you mentioned those yellow weather warnings. They remain in place, and they finish on Thursday, although the snow is expected to continue until Friday. Now, here in terms of the schooling, many children will have given a cry of glee this morning, perhaps, when they found out that their schools have either closed fully or partially. Just looking at Hampshire alone, 40 schools are fully closed there today, and a similar amount partially closed, doing a reduced amount of service. And of course, as I mentioned, those traffic delays. I haven't seen too much disruption, and luckily, thankfully, not too many accidents on our roads. But of course, people will be going slower and being very careful. They're being advised to be careful by National Highways because of the reduced reduced visibility and, of course, the ice and the water on their roads. In terms of the airports, of course, we've seen a closure of Bristol Airport this morning. That's back open. That was because they had to shovel away all the snow from the runways. And Gatwick has seen some disruption, but remains fully open and is giving a full service at the moment. Network Rail on our railways, they're advising passengers to check their journeys in advance, but reporting no significant weather-related disruption on the line so far. But as you said, Mark, of course, these sub-zero temperatures are expected to continue in all four of the UK nations until at least Friday.
Yeah, of course, and given that the snow's already here, I guess the problem is if there's temperatures drop tonight, that's going to make the evening commute quite difficult in terms of all that snow getting mixed up with the ice and so on. But Ray, we'll let you get back in the warm. Thank you for updating us there. And in fact, I can just update you a bit more coming through now from National Highways. They have actually issued a severe weather alert for the southeast and the southwest between midday, which starts now, until 3 a.m. tomorrow. This is for the West Midlands too and the east between 3 p.m. this afternoon and midnight tomorrow. They're saying driving conditions will be extremely difficult, especially for larger vehicles, and that motorists are being urged to consider if their journey is absolutely essential. So, in fact, they are perhaps indicating that it could be slightly worse than originally thought. We'll keep you updated on that. Also coming up after the break, we'll be having more on Charles Bronson's parole hearing at the Royal Courts of Justice and hearing what's been said there and get the view of his son, George Bambi Salvador. So that will be coming up for you in a moment.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, welcome back. Let's update you now on day 2 of the public parole hearing for Charles Bronson, or Charles Salvador, as he's also wanting to be known, making his latest bid to be freed from jail after spending some 48 years behind bars. Well, the parole board review began on Monday morning, making him the second inmate in UK legal history to have the case being heard in public. Well, Paul Hawkins is outside the Royal Courts of Justice for us, and it's been quite entertaining at times, Paul. Clearly, he is wanting the parole board to reflect on the good and the bad of what he's experienced in his life.
Yeah, indeed. Clearly, he knows that this is only the second parole board hearing ever to be held in public, and it's easily the most high-profile. It's packed in court, 76, and he's not even speaking today at the courtroom full of the public, the media, some of his supporters who indeed, some are still behind me. There's a lady behind me with a placard saying British Injustice, Salvador, because he's changed his name to Charles Salvador in 2014. It says Salvador, defender and protector of women and children. But let's bring you up to date with what's been happening on day two. Today, we've heard from an independent psychologist commissioned by Charles Bronson, or Salvador's legal team, who told the parole board hearing that he has mild symptoms of PTSD, partly due to some, in her words, brutal and unacceptable treatment whilst in the prison system. He's previously been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and is naturally somewhat suspicious of other people's motives. He has what she described as anti-authoritarian views, and he feels like the whole system is about humiliating and degrading him. She thought the consequences to Bronson are too great for him, that is Bronson, to allow the violence of the past to happen again. And she said there's been a significant drop-off in those incidences of violence. Now, on the issue of whether the parole board decide to release him back out into the public, whether he is a danger to the public, or whether they decide to keep him at His Majesty's prison in Woodhill in Milton Keynes, or even release him to an open prison, a less secure prison. She said, I think the benefits of being in open conditions and the work that could be done there would outweigh the immediate risks at the moment. But I can't recommend that he's released at this time, because I think there's further work that needs to be done. She told the hearing that his violence towards prison staff has been fueled by a dislike of authority figures, but this does not extend to members of the public. Bronson would be a low risk of absconding if he was moved to an open prison. So that is from an independent psychologist commissioned by Charles Bronson's legal team. Later this afternoon, we're expecting to hear from a community offender manager and a friend of Charles Bronson.
OK, thank you very much indeed for updating us at the court hearing. It's pretty bad weather conditions, as we can see as we were talking about the weather, of course, out and about. Well, let's now speak to George Bamby, who is son to Charles Bronson, or Charles Salvador, of course, as he's now wanting to be known. And thank you very much indeed for joining us, George. Just to pick up on what the psychologist was telling the hearing there, indicating in that sort of view that maybe this open prison, like a halfway house, if you like, might be a better idea instead of him being released into open sort of public arena, because she's pointing out he's never used a cash machine, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very valid point. What people have got to remember is he's been locked up for nearly 50 years. So, I mean, although, you know, all his supporters and me and everybody else would like to see him released into society, you know, the valid point that they make of him going into an open prison and learning to integrate with other people, you know, I think Charlie would be quite happy with that. I mean, obviously he wants to get out, but for the sake of his sanity and for the sake of helping him and supporting him, he needs an opportunity to mingle with other people and to, you know, like he says, walk on a bit of grass and, you know, be outside and talk to people. He's been locked up on his own for so long. No wonder he's got PTSD.
And interesting that because of the 48 years I think he's spent in incarceration, holding anti-authoritarian views, as the psychologist says. I mean, indicating, well, you know, that would happen to anybody, I guess, if you're locked up for that long. Just coping with the circumstances you're in.
Yeah, well, the thing is, a lot of people don't understand. Charlie has been in situations on numerous occasions over the years where he's been beaten black and blue. He's, you know, he's been attacked by like 12 prison officers at a time, and allegedly, and all sorts of different brutality. You know, he's been strapped up in body bags and stood in like something the size of a telephone box for 3 days in a straitjacket and stuff. You know, he's been made to eat his food off the floor like a dog while he's got a straitjacket on. You know, all these things, I mean, you know, you wouldn't treat an animal like that. I mean, come on. So as far as his views against, you know, anti-authoritism, you know, every time he sees a prison officer in the past, you know, he obviously sees them as people that are going to hurt him and going to attack him. Yeah. And obviously the prison service has changed a lot over the years. And now, there's different things in place. I mean, like they don't have to slop out. I mean, the prison officers don't have a bar at the end of the prison where they go and have a drink. People are treated with much more, integrity and all the rest of it.
However, I mean, we reflect the parole board has to sort of take.
It's been through so much in such a long time that it would get to you if you get an animal and lock it in a cage and then every hour open it and keep brutalising it. Then one day you're going to open that door and that animal's going to jump out and attack you. That's what's happened. And Charlie deserves to be locked in segregation. He's been an evil person. He's done a lot of really bad things, but there's got to come a time where he needs a chance.
Last thought on that. Obviously, the parole board has got to balance all the evidence before it comes to a decision. Of course, the thing that counts against him are these incidents where I think there were 11 hostages in 9 different sieges, including his own solicitor. But that's a result, you believe, of what he was actually experiencing in terms of how he was being dealt with?
Well, if you imagine being locked in a concrete box for like 5 years and just being allowed out for like minutes a day, I mean, that psychologically has really got to affect you. And, as a matter of principle with him, I suppose, I mean, this sounds absolutely ridiculous what I'm going to say now, but taking a governor hostage or something like that, that's probably the only opportunity that he's actually had time to spend time with somebody to actually talk to them. He's never caused anybody any harm when he's taken him hostage. I mean, psychologically and legally and all the rest of it, it's wrong what he's done. But I think it's all been born out of frustration for being just locked up and the key thrown away. You know what I mean?
George, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News once more. And we'll continue to update people, of course, from that parole hearing and all the latest details. But let's update you on the rest of the headlines and get all the latest news for you.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1:35. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the two have gone head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak has defended new legislation which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum. But Sir Keir Starmer says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders.
The Honourable Gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
And Duchess of Sussex's daughter has been christened Princess Lilibet Diana at their home in Los Angeles. It's understood Harry and Meghan don't want to deny their children their birthright, giving them the chance to decide themselves whether they're called Prince and Princess. Buckingham Palace says the royal website will now be updated in due course to reflect the titles. And temperatures dropped to minus 15.2 degrees in the Highlands overnight, making it the coldest night of the year so far, as an Arctic blast spreads across the UK. The Met Office says more sleet and snow is expected across southern England and South Wales, with hail showers expected to hit Scotland's northern coasts. Sub-zero temperatures are predicted in all 4 nations until at least Friday. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB plus radio. This is GB News. Mark will be back with you in just a moment.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News. the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live on International Women's Day today. Yes, it's a day devoted to celebrating the achievements of inspirational female role models across the world. And our reporter Lisa Hartle has been speaking to 2 female veterans about their experiences in World War II, a period that reshaped many women's lives in this country.
The war was in my head and I was frightened, but I thought, well, you're deep down in the tunnels at Fort Southwark. You're quite safe. The men are putting their lives on the line, not you. So carry on. So that's what I did.
Mari was just 17 years old when, from a secret network of tunnels in Portsmouth, she was transmitting messages to and from the troops on the Normandy beaches on June the 6th, 1944. D-Day, the largest invasion force in history.
So I was passing messages from General Eisenhower, who was in Southwark House, and all the SHAEF senior officers giving instructions to the troops as they were landing on the beaches. But you knew it was a war because you could hear men screaming. And suddenly it hit me that men were dying on those beaches. Young men, 17, 18, 19. And I thought, well, I don't know if I can go on with this. But I thought, no, for goodness sake, stop it. You've got a job to do. So I carried on.
Mari is one of 2 female veterans who are sharing their stories around International Women's Day.
At long last, the female voice is being heard. And so consequently, if we're celebrating International Women's Day, we can find lots of women who have done things that are exceptional.
Mildred was part of Special Operations Executive, a secret British organisation which conducted espionage, sabotage and reconnaissance in occupied Europe. On one operation, Mildred recalls having to drive into a battle zone to retrieve messages from those who claimed they were allies and wanted to fight.
And we turned up into a vineyard, and as we went right up a steep hill, the people rushed out from a farmhouse, I suppose, and they were shouting the Germans were there. When we swung round the corner and right into a machine gun post, and we nearly tipped over anyway. We got through that, and because they fired at us. But it's very difficult to hit a jeep flying through a vineyard.
Mildred and Mari were at an event this week to celebrate International Women's Day, discussing how women's roles were reshaped during World War II.
I think one day in a year is not very much, but hopefully when people put the television on in the news, there will be some mention of it and just remind people that women do have a place in this world.
Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
And congratulations, of course, to all on this International Women's Day, and some wonderful memories there, and some tributes being paid to all those people and their service, of course, to the country. Now, talking of service to the country, let's update you on the latest royal news, the breaking news we brought you with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and the daughter being christened Princess. Yes, Princess Lilibet Diana. On Friday, we're being told, in Los Angeles, the first time that Lilibet's been publicly referred to as a princess. But Buckingham Palace saying that the royal website will be updated in due course to reflect the titles. Everyone, it seems, being caught on the hop. Not so Cameron Walker, our royal reporter, of course, who's right across the events, because you picked up something quite interesting about who carried out the christening ceremony.
Yes, so the Sussex spokesperson, their statement says that Princess Lilibet Diana, as we now refer to her, was christened by the Archbishop of Los Angeles, the Reverend John Taylor. So the Archbishop of Los Angeles, A, is Catholic, and B, is not somebody called Reverend John Taylor.
Right, because if she has been christened as a Catholic, it might have some circumstance in the royal family.
Exactly, yeah. So Archbishop Jose Gomez is the Archbishop of Los Angeles. Now, I have been assured by someone very close to the Sussexes that Lilibet was christened Anglican by Reverend John Taylor, but Reverend John Taylor is not the Archbishop of Los Angeles. He is the Bishop Diocesan of the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles, which is a part of the Anglican Church.
There we are. So you've heard it here first on GB News.
Heard it here first on GB News.
Right,
I would perhaps suggest or argue that the statement from the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's spokesperson raised a few questions on that, but I have clarified it was definitely an Anglican christening.
Right. The other question to ask is the fact that Buckingham Palace is also trying to make up time on this. Still nothing on the royal website. They've been caught on the hop as well?
It would appear so, yes. This seems to fit the trend from the Duke and Duchess of Sussex that they like to control what information is out there in the public domain. If you remember when Archie was born back in 2018, the statement which was hurried out by then Kensington Palace, who looks after Harry and Meghan's comms, said that the Duchess was in labour, when actually it turned out Archie had been born and had been born for a couple of hours. So instead of keeping with the tradition of a formal announcement by the palace or a spokesperson, giving you regular updates, it looks like the Harry and Meghan have decided again to tell us...
retain control.
Retain control and tell us a few days after the event, which is, of course, now their right, because they are no longer working members of the royal family. And they have decided that they want to give both Archie and Lilibet their birthright as prince and princess to be used in formal settings. Now, the 1917 letters patent set out by George V, which sounds very fancy, states that any grandchild of the monarch, of the male descendants line, has the automatic rights to be prince or princess.
So as soon as Charles became king, this technically came into being.
Yes, it would appear so. And a spokesperson at the time of the Queen's death did say to us that they will update all the relevant documents on the website, etc., in due course, as and when we get information. It looks like, from my perspective, I could be wrong, but I haven't had anything to tell me otherwise, that Buckingham Palace found this out at pretty much the same time that we did in terms of the name Princess Lilibet Diana.
But we do understand that there were invitations to the christening sent to the King and to the Prince of Wales as well?
Yes, so People magazine are reporting this via a source that they have spoken to. They are saying that the King, Queen Consorts and the Prince and Princess of Wales were invited to this christening and none of them attended. I have not had that confirmed by the Sussex's team. I have not had that confirmed by Buckingham or Kensington Palace. But if it is true, it does suggest to me that Harry and Meghan are certainly trying to extend an olive branch to their extended family in the United Kingdom ahead of the coronation.
I was going to ask you about the timing, not just of the christening taking place, but it being announced, with it being so close to the coronation. Does it give us some indication that there may be some lines of communication behind the scenes?
I think it certainly does. I was told by a Sussex spokesperson that they are in email correspondence with Buckingham Palace over the coronation. It looks to me as if there might be a bit of bargaining or negotiating going on. I think perhaps this announcement today might be, I'm only speculating here, but it might be perhaps something that they have negotiated on, saying that we want to give publicly Lilibet, our children, Lilibet and Archie, Prince and Princess titles, as is our right and their birthright.
So the question the question then, does that mean that they too would be coming with their parents to attend the coronation as a prince and princess?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? Archie, of course, it's his birthday on the day of the coronation, 6th of May. Well, I mean, it's a pretty special birthday, isn't it, if you're attending a coronation? Both children are still quite young. It's still unclear whether the Prince and Princess of Wales's youngest, Louis, is going to be at the coronation ceremony. I think it's very likely that we will see George and Charlotte, Prince and Princess of Wales's two oldest. But in terms of an official a role for both the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and their children, I think that's highly unlikely. But we may well see them. Invitations, official ones, have not been sent out yet.
No, save the date's gone out.
But save the dates have gone out, yeah.
Right, well, we saved the date anyway. You got it in your diary.
It's been in my diary a while.
Thank you very much indeed for that. More, of course, as we get it from either Buckingham Palace or from California. Now, to other matters, and the trial of the man accused of murdering Olivia Pratt-Korbel is continuing today. The 9-year-old having been fatally shot at her home and her mother injured too in the Dovecote in Liverpool last August. Thomas Cashman denies attempted murder and firearms offences. Let's get the latest from our reporter Sophie Reaper at Manchester Crown Court. Sophie, what's the court been hearing today?
Well, yesterday, with the prosecution's opening statement, the focus was all about what they allege. But this morning, things turned to evidence, things that we know as fact. So the prosecution called their first witness, an investigator in the Major Crime Unit, PSI Caleb Suggett. He went through some of the key facts, including some specific details around Thomas Cashman, Olivia Pratt-Korbel and intended target Joseph Nee. He then moved on to some drone footage which highlighted significant addresses in that area. That's places like Kings Heath Avenue, where, of course, Olivia Pratt-Korbel lost her life, and Grenadier Drive, where Mr. Cashman was living with his partner and their two children. The jury this morning have also been shown a variety of CCTV from that day, which builds a sort of timeline of events building up to the incident that took place that night on the 22nd of August last year. There was particular focus made, of course, on the movements of Thomas Cashman, going through each of his recorded movements one by one. Court will resume again a little bit later this afternoon, and we'll be bringing you updates on what is said then a little bit later.
OK, Sophie at Manchester Crown Court, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, plenty of politics down in Westminster today with PMQs. What about politics north of the border? Let's turn to Scotland now, because the three candidates trying to succeed Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister and leader of the SNP clashed in a pretty heated television debate last night. It was dominated by jibes over their records in government and, of course, what they were doing for Scottish independence. The harshest exchanges coming between the Finance Secretary, Kate Forbes, and Health Secretary, Humza Yousaf, considered at the moment to be the two front-runners. Ms Forbes attacking his record in government, suggesting there will be a place for him in her cabinet, but, quote, maybe not at health, while her record on social issues scrutinised too in a testy exchange. Well, joining us now, our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Tony, it seems the gloves have come off.
Yes, afternoon, Mark. It was certainly a fiery exchange, and one that not many of us actually saw coming, I don't think. But it was certainly nice to say that, look, now we have a contest and not this drum circle of all friends vying for the leadership that we've become used to. Certainly Kate Forbes was in Edinburgh this morning, talking off the back of last night's debate. Her focus today was economy, and certainly last night we heard a lot, as you would expect, from the Finance Minister. Now, she wants some kind of big changes for the food and drink industry. Certainly the food and drink industry, especially in Scotland over the last couple of months, have been under some quite heavy burdens, especially off the back foot of COVID. The deposit return scheme is a major issue for extra costs for drinks producers, big and small, across Scotland, and there has been talk of an alcohol advertising ban. Now, Kate Forbes this morning came right out and said that she doesn't approve of that advertising ban. She wants us to lift up and support, you know, the industries that commit greatly to the Scottish GDP. What she also said was that one key flaw of the advertising ban would be that the venue where the event was held this morning, the Scotch Whisky Experience at the top of the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, it wouldn't even be able to sell tickets because that would come under the advertising ban. She called for candour and honesty, certainly, in the rest. You know, when she made her remarks quite early on in the campaign about same-sex marriage, she wanted to be known as the honest candidate, you know, and she was fed up of a certain element of sneaky backdoor politics. I quizzed her this morning on how her green economic reboot would affect the relationship between her party and independence. It's pretty much the longest running move towards independence of all the three candidates, but I was interested to know what she thought of, you know, the ongoing relationship between Holyrood and Westminster, as we would await for public opinion to shift towards independence. Let's hear what she had to say.
Well, I obviously support independence because I think independence is the only thing that will protect powers here in Scotland. But in the meantime, for as long as, for example, energy policy remains reserved, to represent the people of Scotland, we do need to work together to ensure that energy policy works for households that can't afford their energy bills next month. And when it comes to the economy, most of the levers are still in the hands of Westminster. So I believe in a growing, prosperous economy and doing all that we can with the powers of devolution. But I won't stop putting pressure on the UK government and trying to work with them to actually deal with the issues that families are facing. Because first and foremost, I'm here to meet the people's priorities.
Well, Tony, she's also defended her performance on this leadership TV debate, saying robust exchanges are important. Does this mean now that we're going to see a different kind of campaign from here on in?
Yeah, well, certainly we're not anywhere near the end of the campaign. We've still got a few days of hustings left to go between Friday and Sunday. I think now this has set the tone. It certainly was so fiery that, you know, it would probably be quite hard to go back to the kumbaya hustings that we had in the first couple of weeks. What I will say, you know, if you look at some of the comments that came out last night, Ash Regan came right out the gate, and I think the first few minutes, saying that the SNP party had lost its way. Humza Yousaf accosted Kate Forbes for her first act as First Minister would be to cave to Westminster on the gender reform. And Kate Forbes, as you mentioned at the top there, she took Humza Yousaf to account for his record in government, saying as Transport Ministers the trains were never on time, as Justice Minister the police were strained to breaking point, and as Health Minister we've got record high waiting times. It certainly sound from this morning, it was they're all still quite friendly, but you know now, as I say, we have a contest and we need to see the divisions.
Tony, under the blue skies of Edinburgh, thank you very much indeed for that. Not a snowflake to be seen there in Scotland. However, we're making up for it elsewhere. We've got a national highways alert for severe weather. We'll be updating you in this next hour on where the snow is and how bad. But let's get the weather in more detail for you now.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Some southern parts of England and Wales woke up to a covering of snow. That snow is turning back to rain across the far south, whilst snow moves into central areas, and the far north stays very cold but largely bright. Northern Scotland woke up to a temperature of -15 Celsius in some spots, whilst the cold air is interacting with a band of rain in the south to produce some snow. But that snow risk moves north because milder air is turning it all back to rain, albeit quite heavy rain across the southwest and the far south of England. The snow then, by the afternoon and evening, mainly focused around the M4 northwards into parts of Wales, especially the Welsh Mountains, eventually into the Midlands as well. It's going to feel cold everywhere, but it's bright skies for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. A few snow showers continuing for the far north of Scotland, but only a few centimetres accumulating, and mainly over hills. The main cause for concern is across the central swathe of the UK overnight, where there'll be some persistent and at times moderate snowfall, especially through Wales, the Midlands, parts of East Anglia and central southern England. But mainly it's around the M4 northwards where the greatest risk is, because in the south it's going to be spells of rain and milder air. And in the far north, once again, a very chilly night, temperatures dipping to -10 to -15 Celsius for sheltered glens of northern Scotland. A few more snow flurries here during Thursday, but the snow risk again moves north. It moves into North Wales, the North Midlands, northern England, and some very deep snow expected over the Pennines, over the Peak District, Snowdonia, for example, where in some places 25 centimetres is possible. I think at the very lowest levels, so for Manchester, Liverpool, more likely to be rain. But above 100 metres, that's the greatest risk on Thursday and into Friday of some disruptive snow through central parts of the UK and eventually into Northern Ireland and perhaps parts of southern Scotland as well. It turns quieter on Friday and it turns much milder in the south.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon. You're watching GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this Wednesday afternoon, huge relief as the RMT calls off its upcoming strikes with Network Rail after agreeing a pay offer. But what happens with the rail companies? That's yet to be sorted out. We'll be speaking to our economics editor, Liam Halligan, to find out too what the strikes have cost us so far, and speaking to the chair of the Commons Transport Select Committee. PMQs seeing a fiery exchange, the government's new migration plan dominating every single question. Rishi Sunak calling Sir Keir Starmer a lefty lawyer, but he hit back saying the Prime Minister was absolutely deluded. We'll be heading to Westminster for all the latest. And snow, snow and more snow. And the Met Office warning that the conditions are going to get worse with plunging temperatures, and it could last to Friday. And we're getting warnings too about the problems on the roads. We'll be getting the latest with our correspondent on a very snowy hill somewhere in Surrey. And as ever, we want to hear from you and what you're doing with that weather, and of course what your reaction to the stories of the day are. Get in touch as ever, gbviews@gbnews.uk. First, the latest headlines with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 2. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers as the pair went head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak defended the legislation which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum. Sir Keir Starmer cast doubt on the plans, though, saying attempts to tackle the number of channel crossings in the last decade have failed and numbers have gone up. He says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders, which Mr Sunak denied, accusing the opposition of supporting unlimited asylum.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists. The conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's daughter has been christened Princess Lilibet Diana at a private ceremony at their home in Los Angeles. The couple's spokesperson says Lily's title of Princess and Archie's title of Prince will only be used in formal settings. Harry and Meghan say they don't want to deny their children their birthright, but to let them decide whether to keep using the titles when they're older. Buckingham Palace says the royal website will now be updated in due course to reflect the title. Meanwhile, Buckingham Palace has reiterated that comments made by a former royal aide towards a charity boss last year were deeply regrettable. Lady Susan Hussey, the Prince of Wales's godmother, apologised and resigned after it emerged she repeatedly asked Ngozi Fulani where she really came from. Miss Fulani has now temporarily stepped down from leading her domestic violence organisation because of the backlash she has faced. The palace says it's supported her with security concerns, social media abuse, and has reached out to Miss Fulani, but has not yet heard back. In other news, the RMT union has called off planned strike action for Network Rail workers following an improved pay offer. Union members have been taking part in walkouts for months in a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Industrial action was due to take place on the 16th and 17th of March, but that's now been suspended. But the union says action with 14 other train operating companies will still go ahead. Temperatures dropped to minus 15.2 degrees in the Highlands overnight, making it the coldest night of the year so far, as an Arctic blast spreads across the UK. The Met Office says more sleet and snow is expected across southern England and South Wales, while hail showers will hit Scotland's northern coasts. Sub-zero temperatures are predicted in all 4 nations until at least Friday. Weather journalist Nathan Rao told us a number of national yellow warnings have been issued, with more still to come.
Disruption, road disruption, snow on the roads, problems clearing the roads, and the school closures as well. Parts of the country over the next few days could get 10 inches, but that's rural areas, the usual places, the Highlands, the Glens, where snow tends to settle. So we're looking for pretty much an accumulation of proper winter snowy weather 8 days into spring.
And a weight loss jab is to become available for thousands of people living with obesity. The appetite suppressant Wegovy will be offered on prescription through the NHS in England. Previous studies found that those who received the drug as a weekly injection over 68 weeks saw their weight drop by 12%. Experts have described the treatment as a pivotal moment. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
Bethany, thank you very much indeed. So, as we start crunching the numbers ahead of the budget next week, we can reflect the number of working days lost to strikes has been rising since last summer. The latest figures from the Office for National Statistics show that it's really hit the economy. But there might be a light at the end of the tunnel, or at least the rail tunnel, because the RMT union, as we just heard, has now called off its planned strike action as regards Network Rail on 16th of March after agreeing a new pay offer. But, of course, the dispute with the train companies, that still goes ahead. Let's break down the latest figures now. The economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, joining us with On the Money. Because we feared, of course, that the combined action of just the rail action, what's happened with the NHS and everything else would have really hit the economy, and how that's going to affect the numbers, of course, for the Chancellor with the budget next week.
Just on the rail strikes, we are in a bit of a limbo here, Mark, as you just indicated. We've got a tube strike in London on the 15th of March next week. That's just the budget. That's budget day. On the 16th, we thought we had strike action by both Network Rail workers. Network Rail is basically the railway line and the signalling and so on. And also the so-called TOCs, the train operating companies. It now seems that RMT workers working for Network Rail aren't going to strike next Thursday, the 16th, in light of a perceived new pay offer. We don't have details of that offer yet. But it may be, still we don't know, but it looks as if the train operating company workers will strike. So that will mean there will be a lesser service, but there won't be no service. So we wait and see, though. It strikes me that, see what I did there, no pun intended, that this industrial action may be entering an end game, and it may be because, as you intimate, there's a bit more fiscal headroom in the national accounts. Growth has been stronger than expected. We have avoided recession. Government spending on energy subsidies, interest payments on debt are lower than the Office for Budget Responsibility expected. That means Jeremy Hunt may have a little bit more room for manoeuvre, which means he can pay the unions, he can pay the train workers, or he can help the train operating companies pay the train workers to break this strike action. And
we had the white collar union, TSSA, also in terms of the rail industry getting to a deal. The fire brigades have got a deal backdated on, I think, 7% last year, 5% for the next year. And a lot of it seems to be massaging a one-off, a non-consolidated deal for this last year where the inflation's been very high.
That's right.
And that's how they're able to navigate their way through these negotiations.
I know a lot of people are still suffering with this cost of living crisis. I know a lot of people are worried about their household fuel bills. I know a lot of business leaders, particularly small business leaders, are really worried about corporation tax going up in this budget and so on. But there are two good things that are happening in the economy, Mark. There are signs of growth. There are signs of economic green shoots. We can see that in some of the survey evidence, the so-called purchasing manager indices. And also there are very clear signs now that inflation will soon start to fall. You've got some of the big bulge bracket city firms talking about 2 or 3% inflation by the end of this year, rather than 5 or 6% as the Bank of England.
The government's target is 2.
The Bank of England's target is 2, rather than 5 or 6% as the Bank of England is saying, down from 10 now. But I do just want to focus on numbers which came out this morning. Everything we've said up till now in this section is sort of breaking news. But numbers came out this morning I thought were quite interesting, so I'm going to highlight them to you. The Office for National Statistics showed us the number of days lost to strike action, and you can see them there, Mark, and I'll take radio listeners through them too. Between June and December 2022, just under 2.5 million, 2,472,000 days were lost to strike action during that 6-month period, and that means on average, you do the maths, 412,000 days were lost to strike action during those last 6 months of last year. But of course, if we see the next slide, during the summer of last year, there was very little strike action, but by December, it felt as if everyone was on strike. So by December last year, 873,000 days were lost in that particular month, which is a very, very high number. We had the ambulance drivers on strike, university lecturers on strike, civil service on strike, as well as the train strikes, both sides of Christmas, remember, and in between Christmas and the New Year. I suffer from them, certainly, and I know a lot of viewers and listeners will as well. But look at the historic context there, Mark. 873,000 days lost to strike action last December, and it felt as if the country was ground to a halt. But look when we were kids, September 1979, 11.7 million days lost to strike action in a single month. And it just goes to show a lot of people are angry at this industrial action. Of course, this is the biggest industrial action we've seen in the UK pretty much since the winter of discontent, the late 1970s. But the scale of the industrial action is as nothing compared to what it was back then.
And that begs the question, have the unions been able to hit the economy with their strike action? Because part of this recalculation, if you like, with the Treasury is they've got, what, 30 to 54 billion extra, or at least they can they don't have to borrow as much to cover that.
Yes, right.
Is that because the economy's not been hit as badly, perhaps, as they were fearing?
They certainly haven't completely crippled the economy. You know, the British economy is much maligned, not least by our own press and commentariat, but actually we're doing pretty well. The PMI surveys I mentioned earlier, the Purchasing Manager Index surveys, this very authoritative surveys, they're conducted in every major economy in the world. Business confidence from those surveys in the UK is now higher than any other major European economy, higher than in the US. Because British entrepreneurs are resilient. They can see that inflation is coming down rapidly. They think interest rates may have peaked. They can see the pubs, the restaurants starting to fill up again. This cost of living squeeze is there, but it's starting to lessen, not taking anything away from the suffering that a lot of families are going through. So there are signs of green shoots. And when you get more growth, the fiscal numbers look better, you've got more tax revenue, you don't have to spend much on benefits, and it starts to get easier for the government. And it strikes me, no pun intended again, that what these figures show, while even at the height of strike action, it was nowhere near the late 70s, and the British economy rumbled on.
Yeah, you know, days of National Rail, of course, we remember.
British Rail.
British Rail and the sandwiches, which of course we remember.
Dodgy egg sandwiches.
You speak for yourself. Let's now get the view of the chair of the Transport Select Committee, no less, and MP for Milton Keynes South, Ian Stewart, who joins us. Mr Stewart, thanks for your time. Lots of heads being scratched at this announcement by the RMT that it suspended its strike action as regards Network Rail, because the signals, if you pardon the pun, hadn't been looking very good, had they?
Well, I'm very pleased that we seem to be moving into a more positive area. It was actually quite a surprise and disappointment when the last round of negotiations didn't result in an agreement, because there was a sort of cautious optimism at that point that the bridge between Network Rail and the unions had been covered, but it wasn't able to get past the union executive. So I know that sort of back channel discussions were continuing. So I'm very pleased that this seems to be bearing fruit, and that the dispute with Network Rail it hopefully is coming to a conclusion. But as you've already indicated, it's quite a complex set. There are different unions and different employers involved. So it's not just a simple case of the RMT and Network Rail.
And in those terms, the Rail Delivery Group, which of course represents all the operators, I think they've called for urgent talks with the RMT to see if this means perhaps there is a softening on both sides. I think I'm right in saying that the offer in terms of the train drivers or the RMT staff on the train companies, 5% for 2022 and then 4% for this year, but the previous year non-consolidated. Could it be the case that the Treasury has allowed a little relaxation in that we've got this extra 30 billion plus that the Treasury is able to play with?
Well, I'm not privy to what specific adjustments have been made. I don't think, from what I've heard and the evidence that my committee's taken, I don't think there's been a sort of huge divide left between the two sides. Importantly, it's not just about pay. Part of the dispute has been about reforms to terms and conditions, working practices and the like. So it's been quite a complex dispute. So I think there's probably been a bit of movement on both sides, both the financial side and the T's and C's. So I say I'm cautiously optimistic that we're inching towards a settlement. But of course, until it's actually done, then it's not settled.
Well, just to update people, I mean, I think the RMT is saying it's holding a ballot to put this new offer to its members. And, of course, that was one of the issues that the fear was that they weren't balloting people on the various offers. What do you make about the charge that the government's been sort of absent in terms of trying to drive this through with the rail companies? Certainly Mick Lynch has been saying, you know, they've been less than helpful in terms of getting the rail companies around the table.
I don't think that is a fair accusation. I've spoken both with the Secretary of State for Transport and the Rail Minister, Hugh Merriman. They're not the direct employers, but I know they've been doing whatever they can to try and help facilitate the discussions. Because one of the previous sort of accusations was that the government was insisting on driver-only operated trains as part of the deal. Now, I think the Department for Transport has made clear that that's not a precondition. So, I don't think it's fair to say they've been unhelpful or absent from the discussions.
OK, well, we'll wait and see what happens in the coming days. But hopefully, as we say, a bit of light at the end of the tunnel at long last. But thank you very much, Ian Stewart, for joining us there with your reaction. And Mr Stewart, of course, the chair of the Transport Select Committee in the Commons. Now, let's head back to Prime Minister's questions in the Commons, taking place earlier with Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer questioning the government's illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak hitting out at criticism by calling Mr Starmer a lefty lawyer standing in our way. However, Sir Keir hitting back by saying the Prime Minister was absolutely deluded. I think it gives you a flavour. Let's get some of the highlights.
If he was serious about stopping the boats, he'd actually steal our plan on stopping the boats, smash the gangs, sort out the returns and clean up the utter mess. He's promised the country that this bill will stop all small boat crossings. No ifs, no buts. Sounds like more talk. So in the interest of adequate action, when will he achieve that?
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
When I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right. He should be apologising, not gloating.
But stopping the boats, Mr Speaker, stopping the boats is not just my priority, it is the people's priority. But his position on this is clear. He wanted to, in his words, scrap the Rwanda deal. He voted against measures to deport foreign criminals, Mr Speaker, and he even argued against deportation flights. Well, and we know why, because on this matter, he talked about his legal background. He's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way.
Mr Speaker, he stood there last year saying exactly the same thing. We said it wouldn't work. They passed the law. The numbers went up. Absolutely deluded. After 13 years, small boat crossings higher than ever, claims unprocessed, the taxpayer paying for hotel rooms, criminal gangs running all the way laughing to the bank, and an asylum system utterly broken on his watch. This is their 5th Prime Minister, their 6th immigration plan, their 7th Home Secretary, and after all this time, all they offer is the same old gimmicks and empty promises. Now, I don't agree with the Home Secretary on very much, but when she says that the Tories are all talk and no action, she's spot on, isn't she?
Well, let's get more reaction now with our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, joining us. And just looking at the rather unparliamentary language for Sir Keir Starmer, he's just another lefty lawyer standing in our way. And then Rishi Sunak, he's absolutely deluded on migration policies. Who won, do we think?
You're really interested in this, isn't it, Mark, that we learnt a couple of months ago that Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak had each other's numbers. They used to possibly still do, text each other from time to time. We sense that there might be a change in terms of the relationship between the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister following what had been a pretty acrimonious one between Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson. Though looking at that exchange today, you'd have to say maybe that relationship was somewhat broken down. I think in the end, actually, the Prime Minister came out a little bit on top. So Keir Starmer really does kind of slightly struggle with this issue, trying to take a hard line, if you like, trying to show that Labour's not going to be soft on this issue of immigration, but in the end actually does not necessarily have a pretty strong line to take in terms of an actual practical plan. Now, that is not to say that the government's plan hasn't got lots and lots of problems with it, lots and lots of potential stumbling blocks down the line, not least of all, will this actually act as a deterrent? Where could these asylum seekers potentially be detained? There's lots of particularly Conservative MPs who do not want it in their constituency. What is the legal battle like going to be with the courts, and where are these third countries that potentially the immigrants could be sent to? We know there's a deal with Rwanda, but at the moment that is on the basis of hosting a couple of hundred, not thousands, let alone tens of thousands. But in terms of the exchanges, the reason the Prime Minister is pretty buoyed by it all is because he thinks he's got public opinion on his side. He's certainly got Conservative MPs. And he thinks that Labour are going to try and block this bill at the end of the day. And thus, it'll be a battle, if you like, between maybe the House of Lords and lawyers and a Conservative government with a relatively popular policy. And he thinks that will play well with the general public.
Yeah, hence the phrases, we are on the side of the people, the people's priority. So clearly that delineation already being marked out. However, interesting that Sir Keir Starmer was challenging or pressing him, when will this actually stop? When will the boats stop? The Prime Minister saying, well, as soon as we can pass the legislation. And this is the political difficulty. Of course, having made the pledge, the promise, he has actually got to deliver it as well.
Yeah, and that's what Keir Starmer's actually got a point where I think at one stage he accused the Prime Minister or the Conservative Party essentially being all talk and no action in all of this. I mean, they've been taking tougher and tougher lines on immigration for years, and the problem not only has not gone away, in many ways it's got worse. And that's why this is a big gamble for the government. If you stand behind a podium that says stop the boats, and then it comes to this time next year and the boats are still coming, well, that's not going to go down terribly well, I don't think, with the general public who are expecting some form of action on this. I think there is at least an acceptance almost across the board that the small boat crisis does need to come to an end, that people are risking their lives. Labour clearly don't think that the government's plan is going to work. They would rather focus on the gangs. But that's why, as I say, this is going to be a big issue for the government. They have made it a big issue, and in the end they're going to need to prove this works, and that's the greatest risk, because actually we do not know that even if this legislation passed, that its primary function will actually work, that of deterrence, that they really want to deter people from travelling to northern France and getting on those boats. Again, I say it's not entirely clear or definite that even with this legislation in place that people will still not make that perilous journey.
Darren, thanks very much indeed. More reaction, of course, to what we've heard on that. But also we'll update you on the weather situation. Latest national highways warning drivers not to travel unless the journey absolutely essential. And the latest from the weather front, the widespread snowfall could generate blizzard conditions on Thursday, we're told. Where's that going to hit you? We'll tell you in a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back to GB News Live. You may have noticed it's a bit parky outside. In fact, we've had the coldest night, I think, since 2010 for this time of year. We're just looking at all the details coming through at the moment. Kinbrace in the Highlands, this year's low, minus 15.4 Celsius overnight, the lowest March temperature in more than a decade. However, it could be even worse tonight, we're being told, and perhaps blizzard conditions tomorrow. These are the latest pictures we're getting in from across the country. I think that might have been the Long Mile or the drive going up to Windsor Castle. But the latest we're getting is that we have the UK Health Security Agency placing all regions of England under a level 3 cold weather alert until midnight tomorrow. The Met Office also issuing several yellow weather warnings for snow and ice, and flights delayed already at Bristol Airport. National highways, severe weather alert for snow in parts of England this afternoon, asking people in the West Midlands and the east of England only to travel when essential because of the conditions. So it is starting to get a grip. So let's update you from the snowy wastes of Hazelmere in Surrey, because our South East of England reporter Ray Addison has made it to the hilltop. Oh, you've actually changed locations. You managed to get away to the relative safety of a motorway bridge, it looks as if that is, Ray.
Yeah, hello there, Mark. I'm in Ash Vale. I'm over the bridge overlooking the A331. And of course, as you were saying, National Highways South East at midday today issued a severe weather alert. And it does seem to have had a bit of an impact on the motorists travelling behind me. May obviously slowing down as those road conditions become more treacherous. Now, of course, that alert came into force at midday, and it's running all the way until 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. And they're saying that motorists should expect delays on the road, but also stranded vehicles and passengers as well. Of course, those melting, not just the snowy conditions, but as the snow melts, it's causing pools of water, which is disrupting people's journeys. Perhaps most worrying for some of our viewers and listeners, they're warning that some rural areas here in the southeast could become temporarily cut off due to that snow, that ice and that water as well. Rail and air travel as well will be disrupted. Network Rail is advising all of its passengers to check before they travel, although they are saying they've seen nothing, no significant weather-related disruption so far. That's not the same with the airports, of course. We know that Bristol had to temporarily close down just before 11 a.m. this morning. It's back open again, but they needed to get rid of all the snow that was disrupting the flights. Of course, Gatwick Airport has seen some disruption, but most flights are still operating out of there. Of course, in terms of the schools, we have seen some school closures, had about 40 over in Hampshire, another 40 partially closed, and similar number here in Surrey as well. And of course, the Met Office are saying that we're going to see this yellow weather alert in place for snow and ice until 7 a.m. on Thursday, but snow will last until at least Friday.
Yeah, and therein lies the difficulty, of course, that we've got a day or two yet to come. Traffic obviously moving behind you there for the moment, Ray, but of course, as those temperatures drop and we get the freezing conditions later, it could be a bit tricky. Ray, thanks for updating us there, but let's speak now to Paul Beecher from National Highways, who's joining us. And Paul, I think I'm right in saying at the moment you've got this warning in particular for the east of England and West Midlands, perhaps into Friday, as Ray was just saying.
Yes, good afternoon, Mark. It's quite correct. We've got quite a few weather warnings out in place, actually. The first one, which was for the southeast and the southwest overnight, that continues for the time being. However, for this evening's drive time and beyond midnight, we're looking more in focus to the east of England regions and perhaps more significantly the West Midlands as well. We know that Wales is getting quite a lot of bad weather at the moment, which is sort of drifting over the country. And we expect that to hit us later on, particularly through the drive time period.
Yeah, we can see lots of traffic moving behind you on those various screens. But of course, the problem tonight, the temperatures will drop and we've got the ice and freezing conditions and that more snow coming on top of that. So have you got an indication how the gritters are doing and the preparations being made for that?
Yeah, preparations, Mark, began really in earnest at the beginning of the week. The salting runs at low temperatures are business as usual for us. However, we've increased the amount of salting runs. We've got in excess of 500, about 530 winter fleet vehicles now, which do their runs up and down the network. I'm sure a lot of members of the public have seen them or got caught behind them on various points in their journey. If they do encounter one, as a safety message, we would ask them to stay back, not get too close and pass when safe to do so. Please allow them to do their job. We're looking to keep the road network moving as safely as we can. Yes, so and we also have pre-positioned recovery vehicles. We expect some difficulty, of course. We want to be able to react and respond promptly to any reports that we get. So we kind of know the areas where we'll get difficulty, and therefore pre-position recovery and salting runs doing regularly help to keep the network flowing, Mark.
OK, but of course it would help you in your job if people actually heed the warnings and take care and obviously look at what the local conditions are. Paul, we'll let you get back to work. Thank you very much for updating us here on GB News and hope everyone stays safe. And we'll update you on that, of course, as we get more weather details. But let's get the latest headlines now with Bethany.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2:34. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has accused the Labour leader of being on the side of the people smugglers, as the two have gone head-to-head in the Commons over the new illegal migration bill. Rishi Sunak has defended new legislation which will remove those who enter the UK illegally and ban them from seeking asylum. But Sir Keir Starmer says the Conservatives have lost control of UK borders.
The honourable gentleman has been on the wrong side of this issue his entire career. He described all immigration law as racist. He said it was a mistake to control immigration. And he has never, ever voted for tougher asylum laws. It is clear, Mr. Speaker, while he's in hock to the open border activists, we're on the side of the British people.
Mr. Speaker, when I was in charge of prosecutions, I extradited countless rapists, and the conviction rate for people smuggling was twice what it is today. I voted against his legislation last time because I said it wouldn't work. Since it became law, the numbers have gone up. He's proved me right.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex's daughter has been christened Princess Lilibet Diana at their home in Los Angeles. It's understood Harry and Meghan don't want to deny their children their birthright, giving them the chance to decide if they want to be called Prince and Princess. Buckingham Palace says the royal website will now be updated in due course to reflect the titles. The reward for information about the shooting of a police officer in Northern Ireland last month has been increased to £150,000. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was shot up to 10 times at a sports centre in Omagh after coaching his children's football match. He remains in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police have released CCTV footage of one of two Ford Fiestas they suspect were used to carry out the attack. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Mark will be back with you in just a moment.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Let's bring you some more breaking news coming through. This is from the Reuters news agency, which is quoting the High Court and in Judge Timothy Fancourt, who is ruling in the case of Prince Harry and his lawsuit against the publisher of the Daily Mirror newspaper, MGN or Mirror Group newspapers. Reuters is reporting that his lawsuit over phone hacking will be going to trial in May, which, of course, is the month of the coronation. The judge at the High Court ruling that this past hour. So the or the lawsuit, rather, against Mirror Group newspapers considered that trial. Judge Timothy Fancourt ruling that the allegations of unlawful information gathering on behalf of MGN journalists between 1996 and 2011 should be part of that trial. So that just coming through from Reuters. And I think we can just get some more now with Cameron, our royal reporter, who we were speaking to only a few minutes ago about the rather more perhaps family matter of
Princess.
Was it official or not? I'm not quite sure whether it was an Anglican service, certainly in terms of Princess Lilibet.
Yeah, so on Friday, Harry and Meghan's daughter, Lilibet, was christened in an Anglican service.
But not at a church. This is the thing. It was at their home, we believe in.
As it's understood, it was a private ceremony at their home, but she was christened Princess Lilibet Diana, right. Latin, which.
However, now the story moves on, as it seems to do with Prince Harry, as ever. This lawsuit was expected, of course. It's one of many legal actions against various newspapers. But the timing is interesting. It'll be heard at the High Court in May.
Yes, so a judge has made this ruling today. So to be fair to Harry and Meghan, they have not decided to announce this today. This is from a judge at the High Court. May, the Duke of Sussex's claim against the tabloid newspaper publisher over hacking allegations may be one of the central cases planned in the High Court later this year. Prince Harry, of course, we knew was taking part in this lawsuit. He's one of a number of high-profile people who are bringing damage claims against the Mirror Group newspapers over alleged unlawful information gathering at its titles. In other words, alleged phone hacking. Former Girls Aloud member Cheryl is also on there. The estate of the late singer George Michael, ex-footballer and television presenter Ian Wright, and actor Ricky Tomlinson. So
this is over quite a time period, as we say, 1996 to 2011.
Absolutely, it is a long time. And then, of course, we remember the phone hacking scandal, which ended with the News of the World, a separate newspaper,
News International,
closing down. But the judge is considering what the scope of basically a planned 6 to 7 week trial. So this is going to go on for a very long time, as you said, due to start in May, heard in London.
And of course, we don't know if the Prince will decide or will have to give evidence in person at that trial.
We don't, but it is perhaps a possibility. Yeah. The Mirror Group newspapers have denied all the allegations made against them, but clearly there are enough high-profile people and lawyers who feel like it's warranting of a trial at the High Court, and we will get that in May. Of course, May, a very significant time because it is happening. The coronation is happening on the 6th of May. We don't have an exact date. I would guess if it's a 6-7 week trial, it will happen post-coronation, but still, it has the potential to undermine or overshadow parts of the coronation.
And we reflect that a lot of the Prince's utterances and the various interviews he's given, obviously indicating about the toll he says that he suffered because of the paparazzi, the photographers, and intrusion from the press as well.
He has, and he spoke about that at length during his memoir Spare. In fact, I would think it's fair to say it's a running theme, actually, his so-called war against the press. He feels like he has been mistreated by the press. Well, he blames the press for several reasons. First, he blames the press for their part in the death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, with paparazzi chasing the car. Then, of course, he blames them for exposing some of his private life when he was growing up as a teenager, the naked billiards and so on in Las Vegas. And then, of course, we come to his marriage to Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and both of them now claim that Meghan was mistreated by the press for various reasons, and it continues, this war against the press, and this is the latest, I think, in the long line of...
Indeed, but just to reiterate, this concerning alleged unlawful information gathering, which obviously is phone hacking, in other words, and that between 1996 and 2011. So the lawsuit from Prince Harry will be part of that wider action in the High Court in May.
It will be.
Watch this space. Cameron, as ever, thank you for updating us with yet more royal news today. But let's also reflect today is International Women's Day, a day devoted to celebrating the achievements of inspirational female role models around the world. So who better to join us than the founder of Girls Out Loud, Jane Kenyon, whose programmes empower girls to channel the potential and make better life choices. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Jane. I suppose the focus on it for one day, but we should be bearing this in mind throughout the rest of the year as well.
Absolutely. As I always say, International Women's Day is every day for me and the people that work in Girls Out Loud. So, yes, it's a permanent state of affairs for us.
OK, and in terms of the ledger of the sort of pluses and minuses, are you on top at the moment?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Right.
We've got a long way to go. I mean, this year's theme of International Women's Day is embracing equity. So, we might talk about equality quite a lot in terms of the culture in organisations and that we're more open to diversity, but the inclusion bit is missing. So that equity, women and girls still have a long way to go to level that playing field so that they actually have the opportunity to harness their equality. So we still have
where is the problem then? Is that in career choices and employment prospects, or is it once they get into the world of work?
think it starts much younger, which is why I ended up working with 12 to 14-year-olds. I think it starts by their lack of belief, by the amount of the landscape they're trying to navigate, which is pretty brutal. When you look at the growth in misogyny in schools, when you look at the level of sexual assault, when you look at the level of rape in schools, which is very scary, when you look at them trying to work out who they are in terms of they think they should be thin by the age of 6, Instagram makes them hate their body. You know, all this stuff is going on, so their equity is getting lower and lower and lower all the time. So by the time they actually get to 16, 17, they're already feeling less than, not good enough. And then that transfers into the world of work. Then we see equity issues in work. So we don't get paid the same. We can't go for the same opportunities because we haven't got decent childcare. We haven't got flexible working. So all of that stuff then plays into that again. So we still got pretty low stats in terms of women being around the top table in most organisations across all sectors. So if you can't see it, you don't believe it's possible, do you? So we've got the same issues going on across everywhere.
And in terms of the weapons, if that's the right word, you can deploy, I mean, education clearly is one of the main ones. But I guess the problem then when you're fighting things like social media and all the things that go on in that respect, it's very difficult to sort of stem the tide, if you like.
Well, yeah, just can't put it back in the box, can we? So what we've got to do is empower girls. We've got to empower them. We've got to, sort of educate them and show them that what a lot of the stuff they're looking at is fake, that they're worth more than that they are enough as they are. We have to put real role models in front of them, which is what we do. It's really important that they see real women with real jobs, having real success, that can guide them and support them along that journey and inspire them to want to go on that journey in the first place. So it's education and it's inspiration, and we need to start as young as possible, and we need to invest in them and show them a different way.
Jane, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that message on this day, but of course every day as well. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you. Now, let's reflect that we were telling you yesterday about the tickets going on sale for Eurovision up in Liverpool, and I think the system crashed. Well, superfan demand so high that as when Taylor Swift tickets went on sale last time, the problems really meant many just couldn't get hold of anything. I think 36 minutes there they went, leaving thousands of people disappointed. But fraud experts now warning that the potential for criminals taking advantage because fraudulent websites, fake tickets also on the increase, it seems. Concerns that hotels on Booking.com targeted by cyber attacks too, putting fans' data security at risk. It's not a happy picture. Well, one person targeted is Emma Richardson, who joins us now on the programme. Emma, very sad to hear this. I mean, what happened to you?
Well, after appearing on the show yesterday, somebody reached out to me and offered to give me 2 tickets, said they had spare tickets. So I asked when for, and they said the Saturday final. I asked how much, so they said £100 each. So I contacted my friend and said, what do you think? So she said yes. So I contacted the person back and they sent over the bank details, and then stupidly, I actually paid it, thinking it was genuine. And then after half an hour, I got no response whatsoever. And then after an hour, and then about an hour and a half later, I realised that it was just a scam. So I ended up phoning my bank to see whether I could do anything about it. I've been onto the Facebook page where we've got a Eurovision fan group going on, and everybody there was asking for tickets, but then getting scammed as well. So there was quite a few on the special Facebook page. So you're not
alone in this then.
Sad enough to pay. Yeah. Because people are desperate to go.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, how many other people then do you think have been affected from what you've been learning on that Facebook page?
Oh, at least 100 people, at least. And it's probably people that aren't even commenting as well. So we've managed to get a few names on the Facebook page that have contacted them. And somebody contacted me saying the same person who scammed me had tried to scam them. luckily they realised it was a scam too. So, yeah, everyone is just saying be extremely vigilant, that the tickets are only on resale on Ticketmaster, so you can't get them any other way.
Okay. So it's not that you thought you were actually dealing with Ticketmaster and were going through to a scam site. You were actually dealing with an individual.
Well, yeah, because after appearing and, you know, your presenter was like pleading if anyone had any 2 tickets spare to give me, then someone reached out. I actually thought that they'd seen the programme and were genuine because it coincided after appearing. So, yeah, I mean, I was gullible, what can I say? But,
and what has your bank said to you?
Well, they said there's a type of fraud that this category fell into and that my bank, luckily, had joined that scheme, whereas other people, I don't think, would be as fortunate. So, yeah, it's just sad, really.
There's a chance you might be able to recoup that money at some stage, then?
Yes. So there's an investigation taking place.
Okay.
I handed over the name, the bank details, sort code and account number. So the fraud team now are looking into that and taking actions from there.
Well, that's good news, but obviously what you want to do is also to alert everyone else and just to be very careful about what happens and to be alert.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. They have put all the photos of the profiles on Facebook, so they can't escape these scammers.
OK, well, Emma, thanks for actually waving the flag to warn everyone else, and we hope, obviously, that you do get the money back in your account, but thanks for updating us anyway. OK, and enjoy Eurovision. That's the other thing, of course, when it happens. Now, a weight loss injection proving popular in the US has now been approved for use here on the NHS. It's called Wegovy, and it's been used by celebrities, we're told, in Hollywood to help them lose weight. But now thousands living with real obesity problems expected to be offered it on prescription here. A weekly injection suppressing people's appetite and reducing weight by up to 10%. But to qualify, adults must also have at least one weight-related condition, such as diabetes. Evidence showing, though, as soon as people stop taking it, the weight, unfortunately, goes back on. Well, joining us now is Alex Guevara, who's taken the injection for around 3 years. And, Alex, was this actually on prescription or just off the shelf, if you like?
No, it's on prescription. It's only available in the UK on prescription.
And what was your problem before you decided to take it?
So I was just really overweight, actually obese, with a BMI of about 38, I think, at the time. So about sort of 19 stone, needing to lose a lot of weight to improve my quality of life and resolve health problems.
Yeah, and presumably you tried everything else, like, you know, diet and exercise, the things that a GP will tell you inevitably.
Yes, the eat less, move more phenomenon. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think most people who are desperate to lose weight have tried pretty much every fad diet and piece of advice that's given to them in society nowadays, and I was no different.
Well, clearly it's worked. However, I understand there are side effects which people perhaps should be aware of as well.
Yeah, the majority of the side effects tend to be gastrointestinal. So you can have nausea, on occasion vomiting, constipation. So it's not necessarily, without side effects.
Yeah, and in terms of the stigma that, we learn these books are all taking the word fat out of, such as Roald Dahl and so on. But that's part of the equation as well, I guess.
It is massively. I mean, one of the reasons why this drug is going to be quite limited on the NHS is because we're still not tackling this issue of obesity as a chronic condition, as a disease with biological and genetic components. Yeah. We're still, for the most part, blaming people that they're overweight because they're lazy and they eat too much. And until that changes, we're going to struggle as a society to get on top of overweight and obesity, I'm afraid.
OK. And how long can you take it for? Because I gather one of the problems is when you stop taking it, clearly then you could be putting weight back on.
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of the research now clearly points to the fact that for most people, it will be a lifetime treatment, no different to taking medication to keep your blood pressure down, or if you're diabetic, taking medication to keep your blood sugar down. So it's not something that people should be entering into lightly, and they need to make sure they've got good medical support. But yeah, the evidence at the moment shows that it's probably going to be a lifetime treatment for most people.
OK. Well, Alex, thank you for joining us and sharing your story. And as you say, obviously, having to get medical advice first before you tried taking it and get a proper prescription through the NHS. But Alex Guevara, good to see that clearly it's worked and may help many people. We'll update you, of course, on all those stories, as we will on the snow. It's on the way, and we'll be updating you on what that means where you are. And Patrick's up next, but let's get an update too on that weather in detail.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Some southern parts of England and Wales woke up to a covering of snow. That snow is turning back to rain across the far south, whilst snow moves into central areas, and the far north stays very cold, but largely bright. Northern Scotland woke up to a temperature of -15 Celsius in some spots, whilst the cold air is interacting with a band of rain in the south to produce some snow. But that snow risk moves north because milder air is turning it all back to rain, albeit quite heavy rain across the southwest and the far south of England. The snow then, by the afternoon and evening, mainly focused around the M4 northwards into parts of Wales, especially the Welsh Mountains, eventually into the Midlands as well. It's going to feel cold everywhere, but it's bright skies for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. A few snow showers continuing for the far north of Scotland, but only a few centimetres accumulating, and mainly over hills. The main cause for concern is across the central swathe of the UK overnight, where there'll be some persistent and, at times, moderate snowfall, especially through Wales, the Midlands, parts of East Anglia and central southern England. But mainly it's around the M4 northwards where the greatest risk is, because in the south it's going to be spells of rain and milder air. And in the far north, once again, a very chilly night. Temperatures dipping to -10 to -15 Celsius for sheltered glens of northern Scotland. A few more snow flurries here during Thursday, but the snow risk again moves north. It moves into North Wales, the North Midlands, Northern England, and some very deep snow expected over the Pennines, over the Peak District, Snowdonia, for example, where in some places 25 centimetres is possible. I think at the very lowest levels, so for Manchester, Liverpool, more likely to be rain, but above 100 metres, that's the greatest risk on Thursday and into Friday of some disruptive snow through central parts of the UK and eventually into Northern Ireland and perhaps parts of southern Scotland as well. It turns quieter on Friday and it turns much milder in the south.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Christie's here on GB News, very much live all the way through until 6 p.m. Here's what's on the menu for the first hour. Well, Harry and Meghan have been accused of barefaced cheek, ladies and gentlemen, for apparently calling their daughter Princess Lilibet Diana, giving her a royal title after doing their best to slam the royal family. In other news as well, Gary Lineker, yes, that's right, there are serious calls to the BBC to sack Gary Lineker after he accused the Tories' immigration policy of being something that the Nazis would do. I went out and about earlier on to see what the British public made of that. Do you think that Gary Lineker on the BBC should be allowed to express political views?
No, not really.
Why not? Why not?
Because he's sports only.
Well, there we go. Where's the impartiality? That's what I want to know. And Ngozi Fulani is back in the news as well. Remember her off of the big royal race row? She, bizarrely, has been named on a list of the most inspirational women in the UK. Happy International Women's Day, everybody. Oh, yes, and some good news as well for people like me who might be carrying a few pounds. There is a miracle new cure, supposedly, to help you deal with fatness. Your fat days, like mine, could maybe be over, ladies and gentlemen. All of that coming your way and much, much more. Keep yourself locked in. Yeah, get your emails coming in, ladies and gents. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Pretty straightforward today. Do you think the BBC should sack Lineker? I will see you.